guidelines, things you should do. There are hundreds of rules for retiring and retiring early. I'm just picking four, not to pick on you, but to be curious, to wonder if this is something that you've thought of. So the first thing that comes up every time that I bring up retiring early in some comment, in some way, it's people can't afford to retire early. People can't afford to live. So the first question we have to answer is, if you retire early, how would you fund it? F-U-N-D, fund it. How would you fund it? The idea that you can't, to me, is silly because so many people are. And the more people that you hang out with who've done it, the more likely you are to do it. And a lot of people say, you become the average of the five people you spend the most time around. I'm going to tell you, you become the average of the five channels you watch the most. So what are you watching? Is it Crash Bros, who are costing people hundreds of thousands of dollars in the last few years, constantly being wrong about a crash that's impending and always new for a new reason? Or is it people who've reached financial freedom, whether they retired early or not, to give themselves a better future so that they stop being one of the constant complainers who say things like, well, how can you retire if you can't even buy a house? Well, of course, if you can't buy a house, that's the first thing you start working on. No matter how you want to invest, the step one is to learn how to save, right? And saving means make more money, not spend less money. It helps if you can spend less money, but if you don't figure out how to make more, you're probably not going to retire early for most people. So how are you going to fund it? There are a lot of paths to financial freedom and a lot of content on YouTube University that just didn't exist when most of us were starting on our financial journeys back in the dinosaur days. You can start and grow a business. Now, if you want financial freedom, you don't want to be tied to the business. I wouldn't be an entrepreneur that goes out and starts a plumbing business without the idea of growing it to where you have people running your crews. You want to grow a business to the point where somebody else can run the day-to-day so that you can get your time back. In other words, you are financially independent, but tied to a job. You just created a job for yourself. If you invest in stocks, you can use several different strategies with stocks to reach financial freedom and make work optional. If you invest in real estate, there are several different ways to do it. Some I don't suggest doing, and real estate is not for everybody. That's why almost always, because the less a man makes declarative statements, the less apt he is to look foolish in retrospect. Thank you, Tarantino. I almost always mention business and stocks before I mention real estate, because while it was the path that worked for me, there is no one right way to do this, but there is a one right way for you, and your way might not include any real estate. It might include investing in stocks and then using something like Mindy Jensen from BiggerPockets does, where she does the live and flip. Right? Move into a house, do a bunch of repairs, live in a kind of a war zone house, property under construction for a couple of years, and then sell it and use the IRS 121 rule to save on up to $500,000 in gains without paying any taxes on it. It's not her investing strategy to own real estate, but that in strategy is how she buys her stocks. So once you figure out how to fund it, you make that decision on how you're going to fund it. It now becomes in the realm of possibility, because most of us, myself included, don't think retiring or retiring early is even possible. For the first 40 years of my life, I think I told everybody over and over and over, I was one of those guys that was going to work till I died, like my dad did on a job site. We have to wake up one day by deciding how we're going to fund it. And when I chose house hacking, a 10-year journey of buying a rental every couple of years, it became possible. It entered the realm of possibility. The second rule, so the first is how to fund it. Second is when. When are you going to retire or retire early? Right? If you're 70 years old and you're thinking about retiring right now, the sooner you do it will be the earliest you can, right? That's how logic works. But when are you going to? And when doesn't just mean I'm going to pick an age. There's a couple of factors with when. The first when is you chose how to fund it. When will you be able to fund it, right? You can't say, I'm going to invest in stocks and use the 4% rule, so I'm going to retire tomorrow, having not purchased a stock yet. You need to purchase 25 times your annual expenses invested in stocks so that you can use the 4% rule. If you want to invest in real estate like I did, I hear a very, and I'm going to say this because it irritated somebody the other day, complete lack of intellect statement. Not sure why they got offended by that, but I'm going to quit my job and become a real estate agent so I can buy real estate. That is not how this works. Not at all. The last thing I would recommend doing is quitting a W-2, and that's going to be one of the main things that makes you bankable. Having 2 years working in the same industry, consistent income, pay stubs to show. It's not the only way, but it is a huge contributing factor to the way someone like me did it, having rarely made more than $50,000 a year, not until the last couple of years at my job, and then retiring on over $200,000 a year in profit. And having a long list of reasons why I'm still not a real estate agent. There would have been absolutely no benefit and a bunch of negatives for me. And no, saving the 3% on my deals would have cost me a lot more than that to be an agent because I was only buying one property every 2 years. The annual upkeep, the acquisition of the license, the training, and the regulations I would then have to follow that I don't even have to know as a buyer would have cost me more than my commissions. So when is can you? Right? You've chosen how to fund it. Now you've got to build the stock portfolio. You've got to grow the business, or you've got to buy the rentals. And then you go, the second part of when, it's not just when can you, it's when do you want to, right? So we'll call this like rule number 2B. Do you want to retire? Right? There's a lot of people who were like me. I reached financial freedom in 2018 after about 8 years of investing, maybe a little less than 8 years, and then worked for 4 more years because I loved my job. And I really wanted to leave the company in good hands. And it took 4 years to change the management, to do all of the things outside of the running the day-to-day that I was doing that most people didn't realize. So I left, making a mistake that will come up later, is after 4 years. So you might reach financial freedom and life becomes a lot better when you have options. And then you might realize if you do love your job or not. Lots of people say we love our jobs because we have to have them to eat. And then once it's an option, you might pull a Michael Zuber, going to work on a Monday at 8 o'clock and say, let's go forward. There's this list of things I don't want to do. And they give you those list of things to do. And by 8:45, he's driving home calling Olivia saying, hey, I don't work there anymore. Joining her in early retirement. I'm hoping the when you want to, don't make the mistake that Michael Zuber, myself, and Matt the lumberjack landlord have made. All three of us made the same mistake. So we knew how to fund it. We chose our paths, right? Theirs was massive portfolios built over a couple of decades. Mine was the right amount of cash flow from the least amount of units. And there are people that did the business and the stocks and stuff like that. But we reached the how to fund it. When we chose the when, here's the mistake we made. Remember, when is when can you financially handle it? You've learned how to fund it. You've acquired the funding source. But 2, it's when do you want to? Here's the mistake. We let work decide when we retired. Don't do that. Michael Zuber had a really bad day, and for the rest of his life, he will have the memory of I stormed out, I won, but he has a bad taste in his mouth of I would have done that job another 3 to 5 years, but they didn't want to do it the way I wanted to. Matt, the lumberjack landlord, was working at a company where he had a version of the same golden handcuffs that I did, where he wanted to stay until the company sold. Like me, for those 4 years when I was training the people up to take over, so it was a smoother transition, so not a bunch of people would lose their jobs. Matt wanted to make sure the owners were taken care of, and the employees that he'd worked with and hired and trained many of in the last couple of decades, but were, good transition for that. So when the sale was completed, he retired. I retired because I had the best day I thought I was going to. Right. I had been working at the CDL school for about 13 years at this point. I'd been demoted all the way down to president of the company. I had a couple ideas that really grew the company, made the owners millions. That's where I got the $2 million in golden handcuffs from. And I loved the job. I liked the people I was working with. I wanted to leave them in good hands. But there was it was a federal agency actually, that was kind of adversarial with our company, trying to shut it down, just attacking us in different angles. Somebody in there got was a bee in their bonnet? Not old enough to know anybody who wore a bonnet, but it's one of those colloquialisms against us. And I spent a few months working with attorneys and practicing NLP to get my arguments right, and having several Zoom meetings. And in a Zoom meeting, I resolved the issue and got the agency fighting for the school. flipped them onto our side. And the meeting went so well, and I knew it resolved the problem so well that I literally in the meeting asked the owners, I said, hey, when everybody leaves this Zoom meeting, can you guys hang out with me for a minute? And then I retired. I retired on the best day because I figured once you reach the peak of your career, there are a lot of people say, well, I did all this work to reach the peak. And like I was talking with my friend Dan at the One Rental at a Time event in Vegas, he's at the peak of his career. And he said, well, when do I choose to retire? And he said, well, okay, so let's flash forward to now when you're 70. And I want you to think of this sentence. The difference is at 70, you'll be able to say, like I could say, I reached the peak of my career. Or I reached the peak of my career and then I stayed there for a decade. That is what you're changing. A sentence 20 years down the road. Instead of when I learned how to fund it, I chose the funding source, I got the funding source in place. And when I wanted to retire, I should have retired. I should have let work control that. So that was fund it, when can you financially, and because you want to. And the third rule before retiring early or retiring is make sure your retirement plan accounts for Black Swan events, right? We'll probably never see this in my entire life, but there could be a pandemic someday. And then the world could shut down for weeks at a time. You could have a stock market crash. You can have an eviction moratorium. You can have a prolonged government shutdown. You can have a major health concern yourself outside of epidemia. Are you ready for a Black Swan event? If you start and grow a business, most people, if you've worked in management, you understand this frustration. If let's say maybe not management as much as the role of the person in charge of scheduling. You have to have overlap, you have to have coverage, right? You know these scheduling terms when you're talking about employees doing certain things or equipment to do certain things. It's frustrating to have overtime for your employees, to say, I need you to work this weekend, or who would like to work this weekend for the hungry person that wants to make more money. Try to be as equitable as you can, right? And that's frustrating, right? You know what's really hard? Way harder than that? Looking your staff in the face, knowing that they all have families and kids and houses. And because of things slowing down, not everybody's going to get 40 hours. That's really hard. It's a little easier to plan for growth and success. It has its frustrations, don't get me wrong. But it's a bear. And not the bear that women choose to meet in the woods. I mean, it's a bear to plan for downsizing, to plan for no raise in a year, no addition to the retirement plan, medical coverage going up, whatever you have to tell staff, that's very hard. If you start and grow a business, have a plan for when things go bad. If you invest in stocks, and I really recommend checking out somebody like Joe Kuhn here on YouTube, and their last name is Kuhn. I watched him a lot when I was getting ready to retire because he had done it. And that's the thing with YouTube University, find somebody who did what you want to do it. Now, he didn't invest in real estate. He did some rehabs and flips throughout his years, but he invested in stocks and he used the buckets method. And that is how you plan for Black Swan events. And I am not in any way going to even paraphrase what he knows about stocks because I'm not a stock guy. If I owned one, I'd probably still be working. The Cliff Notes version. So it's not paraphrasing. If you invest in stocks, you need to go watch his channel and understand his buckets method. But you have a bucket you pull out of for the next several years. So if there is a downturn, you're not touching your investments. You have a certain allocation of your funds. And as you're investing to reach retirement, you're more aggressive when you're younger, you're more conservative as you get older. Like these are all concepts I've heard about and don't know about for stocks. I'm not a stock guy, but I know who to send you to. Be ready for Black Swan events because there is going to be a crash, right? The Crash Bros for a decade now have constantly been making videos, and some of them really got famous in 2020 because it looked like we were going to have a massive crash. So I could see why people fell for it. But now 4 years straight, they've been calling every 3 days when they make a video. Here's the new reason for the crash that is absolutely new and never happened before and totally different this time. And 4 years of costing people hundreds of thousands of dollars in appreciation. They will be right eventually. There will be a crash in real estate. There will be a crash in stocks. So we plan for it. Study the buckets method and be ready for the crash. Now, the bear markets, learn how long they last, all the strategies you can do to prepare for that. If you're investing in real estate, now this is my wheelhouse. This is the thing I planned for. So I planned for Black Swan events. I did a couple of things. I don't want a 10-unit apartment complex because a 10-unit apartment complex pulls all of its tenants from one area. Now, this is when you're starting a portfolio. If you're somebody like Matt or Zuber and you have 100 plus units, of course I would take a 10 or 20 apartment complex. But I don't want to start with that because all of my tenants are coming from one place. And if there is a base closure, port strike, Boeing or Amazon move out of the area, or anything happens, all of your tenants can be impacted, or enough of them to where you can hurt. I wanted originally small multifamily or single family houses, but they don't cash flow in my area. So I wanted small multifamily, duplex, triplex, and fourplex, but at least 10 miles apart, close to several economic drivers. Those things I mentioned, a base, a port, a college, hospital, Boeing, Amazon, large population, two or three of those so that more than one thing has to happen in several areas for me to be impacted. And then I diversified my tenant base, right? I have about 1/3 military, 1/3 Section 8, 1/3 working or retired, so that a prolonged government shutdown doesn't impact all three of my types of tenants. A stock market crash doesn't impact pretty much any of my tenants, except a couple civilians might get laid off. The things that I know to diversify real estate, how nuanced I can get, and how you can protect your portfolio, I'll relate that to how Joe Kuhn knows stocks. That's why if you're a stock person, you should be watching so that you can know these are all of the things that you can do to mitigate the risk, because there is risk in working, investing, retiring. There's risk in everything we do. And what we can do to mitigate that increases your chance of success. How much do you keep in reserves? Right? With stocks, you might have the bucket method, but with real estate, you have a reserve. The larger your portfolio, the larger the reserves to a point. After a certain point, your reserves should be invested to make you more money. I invest planning on rents going down, even though they never have since the day we started tracking rents in 1940. Since we've been collecting the data, rents have never gone down in Class C or B properties that I invest in. I prefer C, where I want to stay. There's more demand in bad economic times. And I only use fixed rate debt. That's what kept me a long time in 4 units or less, so that if something happens in the future, I don't have to worry about rate adjustments. I don't have to worry about a loan reevaluation period, a balloon payment, or any of those kind of problems. I just have a fire and forget 30-year fixed rate debt, and I'll watch interest rates. If they get low enough, like they did in 2020, and I refinanced my entire portfolio at the time. I've doubled my portfolio size since then. Something I need to stop doing, saying in a video. That's 4 in this one if you were counting. I invested planning for Black Swan events, preparing for rents to go down or be paid 50%. And even in 2020, and I'm going to say a word that seems to irritate both sides of the fence because neither one of you know which one did it, but during the pandemic of 2020, I never had one later missing rent payment. Not one. But I planned for rents to go down 50% and still be able to retire. So how are you going to fund it? When are you going to do it? Plan for things to go wrong, because they're gonna. And the fourth rule, before I get to the questions in the comments below, and that's the purpose of these live streams on Tuesdays, is to answer all of your questions. And I do an intro at the beginning, shooting for 10 minutes and only hitting 18, so 50% fail-ish, is to answer your questions. That's the purpose of these videos on Tuesday. I'm doing shorter live streams on Thursdays and weekends for people who would never click on these 2-hour videos. But I'm going to tell people that they should watch the first 10 to 20 minutes of the longer ones. The fourth one is, you are retiring. Retiring early, retiring whatever your age is. It's you. It's not your family. It's not your brothers and sisters. It's not your parents. It's not your coworkers. It's not your boss. It's not your friends. Your spouse and your kids, if they live with you, yeah, they're included as a factor. But when you retire, don't look to your friends for support. Don't look to your coworkers for understanding. Because remember, I've said this in a video before, when you leave your job, you become worse than a stranger to your coworkers and your boss. A lot of people think, oh, I've got a work wife. I've got friends at work. We're going to stay in touch. And that is not true. Ask Matt, the lumberjack landlord, who stayed for years at his company past financial freedom to make sure that the sale went through good. And so make sure that everybody at his company was handled in such a way that that the transition was smoother. How many do you think have contacted him since he retired months ago? How many people do you think I used to work with contact me after I stayed for 4 more years to train the management up to make sure the transition went smoothly? Here's why you're worse than a stranger to your coworkers and your boss. You're weird to your friends and your family. But you worked at a company where you had a mission statement. You had aligned objectives. You had goals. You had the idea that we are helping people or businesses, or we're improving a product, or we're solving a problem as you work there. Your job's important, right? Whatever your job is, you think it's important. It might be just important enough to be there for the paycheck, but you thought it was important. And when your friends, your coworkers, meet a stranger, the stranger will say, "What do you do?" And they can tell them about their job. And their friend or coworker would, "Oh, that's cool. I like that you have a mission and a goal, and you're doing that thing at your job." When you quit, when you retired, you said this with your actions, which speak louder than your words. You said, what I was doing at this company, what this company does, wasn't good enough for me. I'm out of here. Yeah, I handled my finances so I can retire, but I'm also choosing to retire. So when you walk out the door, you become worse than a stranger. Don't worry about it. You're retiring. You're on this planet, if you're lucky, 70 plus years of the billions it's going to be here and has been here. How much of it are you going to experience stuck in a cubicle or a semi or behind a badge? Whatever your job is, it's not the purpose for your life. If you have to be paid to be somewhere, it's not your purpose. It's what you did to survive. Now, you can reach financial freedom. You don't have to get paid, and then choose to stay in your job. Maybe it's your purpose. But if you have to be paid, if you don't eat next week because you don't get the paycheck, that's not your purpose. 4 rules on retiring and retiring early. How are you going to fund it? Because until you decide that it can, you're not even going to work towards it. When are you going to do it? Can you financially? And do you want to? Are you ready for Black Swan events? Those things that are going to trip you up because you can plan for them. And ultimately, you are retiring. Ignore the haters. Brush it, let it wash away because it means nothing. Their opinion means nothing. Now, when you need the paycheck, when you need people to say good things about you at work so you continue to work there, all their opinions matter. You can't say, I don't give a F what people say, because if you need your job, you do. That's why they call it FU money, because now you don't have to care anymore. So thank you for hanging out with me at the beginning of this video. It's not over yet. Now I'm going to get to the questions and answers. Howdy, everybody. I appreciate you guys hanging out here. Dave and Frank and Eugen and Josh, Dennis, howdy. Look forward to seeing you in the next course video. Remember, I saw that you joined the thing, Dennis. All the month of July, every Tuesday after the live, we're going to do course videos where we all jump on, and then we will have people like Matt and Millennial Mike and Zuber and on to help us practice. It says there's going to be an ad. How do I stop it? I don't always notice those. Sorry, I'm trying to stop those. Native to Earth, howdy. I thought it was a thumb down for a second, but my brother would love that. He does it all the time. PE turned RE. Howdy, Curtis. It was great to go see your place. I'm curious what you do, because you had a couple of options. I think the add 1 bedroom in the front was your best bet. Adding 2 is possible. Let me know what you do. What's your advice to grow active income if you're capped at your W-2? Example, salaried teacher. So I have a couple of friends who are teachers, and I know this is going to irritate a bunch of people because you read a bunch of memes and you think you know how the world works. There are teachers who are overpaid. They just make way too much money. And so if you're a salaried teacher, first, where do you live? Right? Because teacher salaries are a lot of times based on the tax revenue of where they're living. So are there areas you can move to increase your income? And if you're doing an average house accounts a year, can you change where you're working Although, do you want to if you've reached tenure, which I think where you work, it's like 3 years plus, and you're beyond that. But what do you cover? So I have a friend whose primary teaching is how to speak English as a second language, but then they pick up different classes covering different subjects. So they add to their workload. I have a brother and sister-in-law in California, California, my favorite term when I talk to him, because I moved out of there after growing up there and uh, try to never go back whenever possible. But he is an ag science. No, he's an ag mechanics teacher. She's an ag science teacher. So they found teaching roles where his is year round, right? Because ag mechanics doesn't have the summer off like others. So is there something you can do in the summer when you're thinking, oh yeah, I got this teaching job because I'm gonna have 3 months off in the summer to do whatever I want. But is there something you can cover? Right. I was working at a CDL school, basically started at $17 an hour. I wasn't making a lot, but how much overtime could I work? What skills could I learn, right? So I have a Class A CDL, you cover that, but I could also teach dump truck and developed and created a cement mixer course. I could teach passenger, right? So I could, if I can cover things, I can cover more overtime. And what was I able to cover? Teaching kids, far more challenging than putting your life at risk in a semi on a freeway if somebody's never driven one before. I'd rather do that all day long than be in a room with teenagers. I've had 3 teenagers, and what is it with kids at 14 that makes them go not ape, but bat crazy for a year, and then they snap out of it. But that's the year I would avoid. I played World of Warcraft and sold things online as a side hustle. You could start and grow a YouTube channel, but you might be shocked that it might take 3 years, 20,000 subscribers, and those 3 things: 3 years, 20,000 subscribers, 1,200 videos to ever have your first month that makes $1,000 on YouTube. That's a long-term plan. So don't do YouTube if you think it's going to be the way to make money. Now you can make money through affiliates, right? You can do Amazon links, like in the link below. There's a link to the locks that I use in my rentals, the lights that I use in my rentals, the one rental at a time books that I've narrated on Audible and on paper ones. And that can generate some income, but again, takes years. It's going to track your social media. If you do take the summer off, what job could you do? Reach out to Aspland Tree Service. That's what's in our area here. There's probably a tree service in everyone else's area. And when they do their line clearing in the summers in most places, that is a job that you can do. And you can literally say, I'm coming here and say, I'm a teacher. This is my time off. What can you do? And they'll put you to work. And some of those are prevailing wage jobs. So $45 to $60 an hour to stand there and watch the road. I guess the hardest thing to think, Curtis, do you want to be a teacher? If you're a salaried teacher, you put all the work, you got the degrees in to get into the position, you've worked long enough to get tenure. It's what you want to do. Maybe you find a job. Like, what do you make? Don't tell me, don't answer in the comments, but think this through. What do you make? If you can go get a local truck driving job for Old Dominion, Oak Harbor Freight Lines, Redaway, R&L Peninsula, making $95,000 a year, then overtime on top of that. I made 115 when it's like 114 at Oak Harbor Freight Lines. Do that for a few years to put the money to work, get some rentals so that work is optional, and then go back to teaching because now the money doesn't matter. Not what you want to hear, probably, but maybe it's not truck driving. Maybe there's some other skill that you have that does pay more than teaching so that you can reach financial freedom. And so that's the whole point of number 2 is when can you retire early? When you can afford it and you want to, right? So if you can afford it and then you want to retire from the job you were doing so you can teach, if that's what you really love to do. It's a great question. I was in, like I said, a very similar situation. I was teaching. I wasn't making a lot of money. So I had to do several things. One, you're killing it with house hacking. You're on your second house hack, right? You started with a duplex. Now you're in a triplex and you're house hacking a unit. You're looking at adding rooms to increase the revenue. So you're doing all of those things to supplement your income with cash flowing rentals. And yeah, for the first year or two, it's slow. It sucks, right? We say the first 5 years suck, which doesn't suck not enough to get started. Because Frank told me one time that I said it sucked so bad he almost didn't get started. It doesn't suck that much. The next 5 years are amazing and make the first 5 worth it. You're in the first 5 now. The Riley Oak, howdy. And Toy Story. I don't know if I can do. Although I am a Tim Allen fan. Chester, Michelle, howdy. Pick on us. I, my video the other day where I was just trying to say, if you want to reach financial freedom, you're going to really have to stop lying to yourself. I had to block a few people because apparently I irritated some people with being transparent and using words they didn't like. And I'm not going to change who I am. I'm saying, here's who I am, and this is how I did it, and this is how I reached financial freedom. If you want to reach financial freedom, you want to do it the way I did, it's probably going to include a little bit of how I did it being me. Dividend Dave with a super chat jumping in here. I appreciate that. And I see it now. I see a dad joke coming, unless this is an actual question. I think my fridge has a mechanical issue. The other day when I opened the door, I heard a scream. Turns out I accidentally caught the salad dressing. Thank you, Dave. I might copy and paste that to my kids because I torture them with dad jokes. TPO, howdy. Buzz Tune, Wealth Building Journey. Michelle Meyer, I was told today I should buy a business. Now so I don't know if a lot of people know this. There is an MLS, multiple listing service, like there is for real estate for businesses with brokers that get usually like 6% for the transaction. Huge business in that, lots of businesses for sale. But are you an entrepreneur? I'm not. I'm an investor and a pretty decent W-2 employee. But there are a lot of businesses out there for sale. And I have a pretty good friend. And what he does, so I won't name the propane company by name in case anybody works there, but he buys a propane truck and then he works several neighborhoods to build a route on filling propane containers, tanks, whatever you want to call them. Has all the licensure in place, gets the business built up, builds the route. Then he sells the route as a business to the larger propane company. And he's on like his fifth or sixth time doing this. Hundreds of thousands of dollars of profit in each transaction. Business runs okay and does okay as he builds the route. So interesting way that he does it. Hello from Santa Cruz. Wasn't that the name of that was the name of the soap opera in the 80s, Santa Cruz. It was one of the only English speaking things I can watch when I was stationed in Okinawa. I'm not a soap opera watching guy, but when there's like no channels that speak English, but there's one show. The girl from Santa Cruz was the bride in Princess Bride. So all I remember about that. Jason, 57 Max, howdy. And Jason, Dion, can you recommend an attorney to look over my lease in the event I need his service? I'm North Seattle. Beth Traverso might have a suggestion. So I don't know any in North Seattle. Actually, I wouldn't really know any except for like the one that I have on retainer. What I recommend when it comes to attorneys for real estate investing is look in your court system, right? So you want an attorney who's an officer in your court. So they know the judges, they know what works there, what doesn't. And then I retained mine. I think I have $1,500 on retainer from like 8 years ago. And I think I paid one time for them like $70 or something to look at my lease. But it wasn't to look at my lease and tell me what you think about it, what should be changed. It was, I asked, and I learned this from my brother. He said, have your attorney ask him this question and say, since you are an attorney in this area, so in North Seattle, wherever you're going to find an attorney in that area, have them look at your lease, pay the fee, right? Since you work in this court system, is there any verbiage you would want to add to my lease to make it more likely to make your job easier if we ever go through an eviction together? That's how I handle attorneys on evictions and real estate stuff. I don't have any that I recommend or know or anything. It's just that's what I would do. So if I move to a new market, I'll do the same thing. An example is if I didn't find my current house hack duplex burr modified that I was going to invest in Gary, Indiana. To do that, I was actually going to take my leases to Gary, find some attorney that works in that court district and say, here's the lease I plan on using. What would you add in case you had to go through an eviction here? Hope that helps, even though I don't have a name to recommend to you. Michelle, real estate is a business. It's a service-based business. That is true, Michelle. You have some duplexes now in the same area where I do, and you have customers who rent from you. Jason, howdy from Chicago. I don't have the knee-jerk reaction to say I'm sorry when I hear you live in Chicago, like I do when somebody lives in California. Eugen, howdy. Hello from Belgium. Sounds like a real place. What if you came to USA with, I'm going to say that's $200,000? Can financial independence be achieved in less than 5 years without work? I wish I could say yes. So, not without work, and I don't know about 5 years. I say it's a 10-year journey, even with a regular income. It's possible. There are some creative strategies, but the risk goes up the more creative you get. The reason So here, and I'm probably going to be doing a video on this, on how much I invested in a decade, right? Because there's the end result is better than the story, because I find that the story depresses people. The end result is gross value of net worth of real estate is a little over 6 million. Net worth is a little barely over 3 million now. But I invested $320,000 over a decade. So it sounds like you only need to invest $320,000 to own $6 million in real estate. And that's not how it works, Eugen. I put down $15,000 as a down payment on my first duplex at the start of my investing. So that property, when I retired, so I'd been in for 2 years, retired at 12. So 10 years later, I'd owned that property for 10 years, 10 years of appreciation, principal pay down, and rent increases. 2 years later, I bought another duplex. No, it's not buying the duplex that gets you the financial freedom. It's having one for 10 years, one for 8 years, one for 6 years, and then, it's sped up after that because of the income snowball. But it's acquiring the rentals. So with $200,000, I would say come into a house hack, right? So how are you going to qualify for a mortgage if you don't have work? Lenders are going to want to see consistent income. So you might have to switch to a DSCR loan. So that's a debt service coverage ratio loan, meaning they're going to want a larger down payment. It's usually not going to be 3. Your first conventional loan can be 3 unless it's small multifamily. They generally want 5. FHA is a worst case scenario. It's not what you start with. Let me know if you want me to explain that. But you buy a house. Now, DSCR, it's not for house hacking. Right? So you're going to be buying an investment property, so you also have to find a place to live. Now you want to own it for 2 years. You have to get rental income on 2 years of tax returns for lenders to consider rental income from your real estate, 75% of your rental income in your debt to income ratio. So you come into the country with $200,000, you put 30 or 35% down, whatever your DSCR limit, and that might be all the way down to 10%. Check with lenders. You can actually contact them now before you even come here. What part of the country you're going to? I'd look out and I'd probably contact Matt, the mortgage guy, and ask him, hey, I'm going to this area. Do you have somebody who services that? There's Convoy Home Loans, there's Velocity Mortgage, there's tons of DSCR lenders out there that cover different types of lending that'll tell you better options than I know. They will, so you buy the rental, you get rental income for 2 years. That makes the work not as important. You don't need the consistent W-2 income, because now you can go in 2 years and get a conventional loan at 5% down for a duplex. Right. So you buy a $300,000 or $400,000 duplex. Now you need $15,000 to $30,000 out of that 200 to buy the next one. So you're 2 years in before you get your second property. Now those properties need to cash flow and stabilize, and you've got to learn how to get leases in place. How do I manage my tenants? How do I maintain my properties? Learn all of the local laws, get to know the investors there, because like my friend Millennial Mike says, the investors in your area are your strongest resource. And at the 4-year point, you only have a couple of rentals. You've got some cash flow, and you're getting close to probably running out of your $200,000. So is it possible in 5 years? No, but you do that strategy and you add another 5 years, where you add another rental in 2 years, and then maybe another in 1.5, and then 1 in 1. You get to 10 years, you have 6 or 7 rentals that are cash flowing. Yes, it's possible, but this is the 10-year journey. Even if you have a good starting position, I didn't. I was $89,000 in bad debt I didn't know about. I was a single parent with 3 kids. And like I was telling Curtis earlier, I was only making $17 an hour after getting laid off from law enforcement. And I sat down and I said, okay, it's going to take 10 years. Now, would it be nice to do it in 5? Sure. But if you plan on 10, you're more than likely going to hit it. And that's just real estate. If it's going to be stocks, I'd maybe go ask Joe Kuhn the same question in his chat sometime. You might have to ask, his channel's much bigger. You might have to ask him a couple of times until it hits his radar. But I know real estate, and that's how I would do it. Now, if you have an entrepreneurial sense and can start a business, there are other ways to do it. But there's something like 9 out of 10 businesses fail. But there's a lot of risk factor there. The one thing I would know as far as investing in real estate, if you're a foreign investor here, is the FIRPTA tax kind of makes it really hard to be a flipper or a seller. Right. And this is the Cliff Notes version. If a foreign investor buys real estate in the US, owning the property works basically the same it does for everybody else. But if you ever go to sell it, you have a 15% gross sale tax. Meaning if you bought a property for $1 million and you sold it for $1 million as a citizen in the US, you don't pay any taxes because there was no gain. If you buy it for $1 million and you sell it for $1 million, you're going to pay $150,000 in tax, but you don't have. So buying and selling, not so much. I've never sold a property, so I think it's possible to reach financial freedom without selling properties, but I would take that off of the menu of things I would think of doing. Aloha, financial firefighter. How are you, Mark? Josh, Robert, howdy. Over 10 years, how much did you rent go up on your properties? Very important. I'm trying to estimate how much my rents will be in 10 years to get a better idea of how many units I will need. I would plan on rents being exactly where they are now in 10 years. I've never invested on the idea of rents going up, and I've never invested on the idea that rents, I just started this video with, I think rents can go down 50%, right? I don't think they can. They never have. They've never gone down at all, but I plan on them going down 50%. So let's look at it a different way, because I can help with the question. Instead of thinking how many units will you need, what return on investment will you need? So if you invest for a 5% return, just a 5% cash on cash return. Some markets, like where Millennial Mike invests, you can get 20. I invested 10 was a great deal, right? And all mine were base hits. So one or two great deals, most base hits, right? So hovering around that 10%. It does go up over time. Yes, rents have gone up quite a bit. Rents that were $1,100 or $1,200 on a unit when I first got it are now $2,000. So 80% increase-ish. But I wouldn't count on that in a decade. So how much do you need to retire is a monthly recurring amount. If you need round numbers, $10,000 a month to live, $120,000 a year, right? 12 years, $10,000, $120,000 gives you $10,000 a month. So you need to make $120,000 a year. How much do you need to invest, right, on down payment, closing costs, immediate repairs to have 5% of your return give you that 110? I'd run the math on that because it's not door count, because door count doesn't tell us anything. How much per door doesn't tell us anything. $100 a door is a good minimum, right? But let's say you're shooting for $500 a door. Does that make it a good deal? If you get it for free with a VA loan, maybe. If you bought it for $1 million cash with no loan, is $500 a month a good deal? That's what, 0.06% return on your money? Not even a percent return? Learn the cash on cash, so return on investment, to figure out how much you need to invest. Then add the element of time. And I would never predict rents going up in the future. It is entirely possible, right? So when I say rents have never gone down, that's market wide. Detroit, when all the car manufacturers moved away. Gary, Indiana, when the steel plants moved away. Silicon Valley, when the dot-com crash happened, right? There are places where in a 100-mile radius, rents could just tank. So that's not a metric I would use. And estimating a year, what I would think is, how many rentals do you think you could acquire in 10 years with the amount that you can save, your lending ability, your willingness to house hack, right? That more impacts what you can grow than how much rents will go up. It's a good question, because I'm trying to process it. I'm trying to think if I've ever looked at it that way. I look at area average rents, and if rents were about 5 to 10% lower than that, how would this property perform? How many of these properties do I need? Because remember, there's two things that tell us when to buy. It's not prices, it's not interest rates, it's not rents, it's not what we think is going to happen with interest rates or what we think is going to happen with properties, with prices or rents. That's gambling. The two things that tell us when to buy. First, are you ready? And I've seen you in the chat for a while, Robert. So I'm thinking you've done the research, meaning you know how to study your market, you know how to recognize a good deal. But also, are you ready? Meaning there's nothing major going on in your life, like a death in the family, divorce in the family, birth in the family, anything that takes away your focus from being able to hunt for the good deal. So are you ready? And the second thing is, did you find a great deal? Right? When I started investing with a 10-year plan, it was, I think I could probably get one every couple of years, right? But it became a year and a half because I was ready. I found a great deal. So it wasn't like I'm going to set the goal of one every 2 years. It's, am I ready? And then did I find a great deal? So when you go to find a great deal, now is when you've got to pick the strategy, the market, study the market to see if that strategy fixes, see if you need to adjust your strategy to fit that market, or see if you need to adjust your market. And all of that is where the work comes from. I'm curious to know some of the questions there. How much do you need per month? What cash on cash return can you see that beats your area average? And how much would you need to invest to reach what you need to live? That's kind of the questions I would go through to try to get to the same solution. Ryan, howdy. Whole guy REI is going to call Frank and let him know I don't work there anymore. Oh, that's the coworker that judges you the most. Need health insurance? Yes. Did somebody ask about health insurance? That would be great if I missed it. I would be sorry. But yes, if somebody needs health insurance, there's too many people who stay at work because they need health insurance. You just need an asset for every expense. Health insurance was one of the easiest things to solve for retiring early. Wealth building journey. We could see a recession, even though the odds are pretty remote right now. Technical recession, by definitions that keep changing every couple of weeks to fit whatever politician needs it to say before they get reelected. Four, and Zuber covered this recently in his daily update, but 4 out of the last 6 recessions, now one of the recessions, home prices were the cause of the recession, so that one kind of gets a pass. But 4 out of the last 6 recessions, home prices went up. The person to worry about during a recession is the person who only has a W-2 income to rely on. Ash, howdy. Eddie B, trucking, howdy. Dividend Dave, have you punned that like button yet? Remember, if you like the content, please hit the like button. If you don't like the content, hit the dislike button. But do it twice, so I knew for sure you meant it. BMax, howdy, greetings from Portugal. BMax Rider, good to hear from you in Portugal. I went to Portugal and I did not enjoy it. I didn't go to Lisbon and I didn't go to Porto. I went to the Algarve and I spent a whole 2 months, the whole thing, about over 3 days in every major city across, in a couple non-major cities. Alvor was really pretty. Albufeira was the funnest place to go. And I have videos on why I ended up not buying. I actually literally went to Portugal to buy a place. I had $500,000. I was going to buy a place in house hack Portugal. Next time I go there, I'm probably going to go to Lisbon and Porto. Interesting fact about Portugal. First largest increment of atheists worldwide. It was 1755. You might have to Google the reason why. See, the chat is going on here. I love the chat in the comments. I appreciate it. Yeah, Jay Goofy. Anyone catch the name of the guy with the buckets method? Hope you're still here. His name is Joe Kuhn, and I see Ash put it there. Yeah, it's Kuhn. He retired at 54. He just turned 60, so he's been retired now 6 years, but he completely did it off of stocks, and he really goes into detail on what retiring is, an early retirement is like, and using a method that I didn't. But his retirement journey, what it's like after retiring, tons of touch points there where we identify, although I haven't touched him. by some rule. Ash, have you ever done a seller finance deal? If you haven't, was there a particular reason why? I've made some offers on seller financing. I'm the lazy, boring investor. I don't do what Cody and Christian and Millennial Mike have done and Matt has done is build those Zuber those relationships with people to find properties. All of my deals are from the MLS, conventional lending. Like look at my face, super boring, boring and not sexy. And I've made seller financing offers, came close on one or two. I think their amount they had left on mortgage stopped me because it was just over the 50-40-10 deal being an option. I have all of the reasons why a seller finance might work for the seller, and I give that away in my free binder course, right? So if you want your tenants to ask you to raise the rent, you can go to DionTalk.com. The binder course is free. In the binder course, I include my seller financing letter and my spreadsheet that I track my income and expenses made by me and my CPA for free in that course, which is a free course. I don't know if I said free enough there, but the word has lost all meaning. Tortlets. I would do seller financing. I just didn't pursue it, right? If you do the Christian and Cody, find out who owns the multifamily and the small multifamily in an area, find the owner developer relationship, get to know how they did it, and then eventually just buy a bunch of properties. Genius strategy. It's not what I did. I was working full time, raising 3 kids as a single parent. 5 in this time. I gotta stop saying that. I didn't have the time to do driving for dollars. I didn't do mailers. I've not done anything like that. I literally have an MLS search set up. Now I've looked through, but mostly when you see on the MLS seller financing available, it means it's because it's a really bad deal and it's so bad, we'll sell it to somebody that can't get lending. That wasn't me. Would do seller financing. I'm just too lazy to pursue it. I think it's a great strategy. And then my chat moved, which I love. It means there's more comments and I appreciate every single comment. Why did it move a lot? That's good. Here we go. I-303. I say that right? Or am I messing up an acronym? Bob, maybe? How were you able to buy a house every 2 years? First, I purchased a house in 2000 when I was going to raise kids in it. So it was an owner finance, first time home buyer thing that was actually better than the VA loan. There was no mortgage insurance. It was zero down. I walked away from the closing table with a check for $1,200. They wrapped closing costs up into the thing. So check your counties every now and then for first time home buyer programs. It wasn't FHA. It was just a good program. And I was going to own it forever, but it had an adjustable rate. Then I went through a divorce and I refinanced to give her a portion of the equity. And then there was the housing crash of 2008 and I couldn't even give the house away. So I owned one for a decade before deciding to even become an investor. Right? So that's the house that I had. And I was underwater on it. Here's how I got the first one in 2 years, right? Because I wasn't making very much and I had a bad debt to income ratio. I had $89,000 in bad debt, $17 in salary, 3 kids, single parent. Not a pretty picture. Could have went back to driving and made more money. But when I started working at the CDL school, and no offense to the guys who worked there at the time, but I looked around and I thought, in 3 months, I'll be running this place. 6 months later, demoted to president of the company. So stayed there, worked out pretty good. I moved from my house. Now imagine if you would do this. This is where retiring early comes from. What are you willing to do? I lived in a house on a lake with 3 kids, and I took my kids and we moved into an apartment. Imagine going to your family and saying, hey, we're going to leave this 4-bedroom house on a lake with private access and tennis courts and what else was it? It was tennis, basketball, big picnic area. We're going to move into an apartment complex. Most people go, oh, my family would never do that. My kids were excited. One of my daughters said, I get to be the new girl in a new school. And my son goes, we're going to live in one of them places that has all the other teenage girls living there. That was a real hard sell. So we moved there for 2 years and I rented out the house. So I didn't have a good debt to income ratio, getting the rental income from the house on my tax returns for 2 years. Even in the first year, I lost 6 grand because I didn't know what I was doing. But it was rental income on 2 years tax returns so that I can then go buy a duplex. So it was only a 5% down, owner occupied duplex. I moved from the apartment to the duplex. So I've moved my kids twice. They didn't care. People are resilient. This is what are you willing to do? And from the apartment to the duplex, right? We got our own yard again. 6 for counting. I got to work on that. Lived in the duplex for 2 years. And what living in the duplex did is a couple of things. One, I started to get demoted and make more money at the school. No, I never made more than, I think 61,000 was the most I made until the last 2 years working there, maybe 3 years working there, just before retiring, because my 22, I retired in the middle of the year. But 2 years to save for that duplex took my payment from the apartment from $1,500 a month down to $300 a month. So I was working overtime, making a little more money at the company, still playing World of Warcraft and selling things online as a side hustle. And I was saving. So now it took 2 more years to buy the next property with a 20% down purchase price. Now I live in a fairly high cost of living area. Duplexes at the time were about 300,000. They're twice that now. So owner occupied becomes a little more important because it takes less money down, like my friends Josh and Mary did last year when they bought their first duplex, or Curtis did buying his first triplex, or his second property, his triplex this year. So it's still happening today. People, and Curtis is single, teacher salary, right? Doing this, still possible to do it in today's world. Wherever you live, prices might be more or less. The more expensive the area you live in, the more important house hacking is. Right? You can eliminate a $4,000 a month expense in something like Seattle versus saving $800 a month in Gary, Indiana. House hacking is more important in Seattle, where Millennial Mike does it, than it would be in Gary, Indiana, where he invests. At the next 2, so 2 years in the apartment to buy the duplex, 2 years in the duplex to save for that first duplex. Now I've got the house cash flowing, the duplex that I'm in, the other side rents have gone up, the duplex that I've got cash flows. I'm making more at work. I'm still working overtime. So this is called the income snowball. And all these things start to come together. No vacations, no eating out, not very often. And if I did go out, I got an appetizer, if anything. 7. Year and a half to buy the next duplex. So it started to speed up. And then I made a huge mistake. And I paid off the single family house because it was the lowest mortgage, $121,000, highest interest rate, like 8%. Best, it hit debt avalanche, debt snowball, took care of it, cost me $1 million to pay off that house. Then I bought a fourplex as a house hack. And then I emptied my retirement accounts, which is what my video is going to be on Thursday, is when you should empty your retirement accounts. And then snowball from there. So that's how you can do it every 2 years, is the money increases over time. Step 1 is saving. Whether you own 0 rentals or 50, to get to the next one, you save. To save, we increase income. You should always be thinking of ways to increase your income. So many people, they do things like this. I get a mortgage for my house, 30-year fixed rate debt, never think about it again. Right? I said that at the beginning of this video. But how often do you think I look at my insurance premiums? Every year. Every single year, especially in years where they go up a bunch. Because there might be things you can do, like raise the deductible if you don't plan on using it. Shop other companies to see if somebody's got a better rate for sometimes better coverage. There are ways to increase your income without just raising the rent. But that's what it is. Time. That was a great question. Thank you. Don't look for your government, for your retirement. Chester's so true. Eddie B. Trucking. I'm an over-the-road truck driver who is living out of my truck. Should I make a move on a deal when I hit 5% down plus reserves, or wait until I have a full 20% plus reserves? Thanks, Dion. As an over-the-road truck driver that's living in your truck, I would never say commit fraud. If you intend to buy something, intend to live there. But that doesn't mean you can't have roommates. So buy a duplex, rent out the other side, rent out a side to somebody that's on your side, and you're the roommate that has a room, right? If you're never there. When I bought my fourplex, I had roommates in the other room of my unit. Didn't need it, but it helped saving for the next purchase. I wouldn't save, but I'd be hunting for deals. So as you're saving because remember the 2 things that tell you when to buy, Eddie. Are you ready? So if you're an over-the-road truck driver and you've saved up 5%, you are ready to buy a house hack. Then there might be lending products out there for 5 or 10% down because lending changes often. So constantly be talking to lenders about what's available. You might be able to buy an investment property with 10% down, not needing the 20, right? It changes often. So you keep saving while you're looking for the perfect house hack. Now that means the math makes sense. It'll be a cash flowing, good return on investment once you move out and it's no longer a house hack. It's in an area you want to invest in. It has the elements that help limit tenant turnover, like side-by-side small multifamily, washer dryer hookups in each unit. Whether your area wants carport, garage, swimming pool, whatever the thing is that makes rentals more stable in your area, you make sure you have them. In some areas, having a pool is a negative. Some places it's a positive. You have to know your local market. And so if you're hunting and you're say, okay, I want a good base hit. So it's got to have the good ROI. It's got to have all these other metrics. It's got to be close to the other economic drivers. Every month that you're looking, you're continuing to save, right? I had about a 2-year period from 2021 to 2023 where I wanted to buy my most expensive property. I said it in, I want to say hundreds, but dozens of videos. I'm looking to buy a fourplex that costs at least $1 million. I have $250,000 saved. I want to put down a 25% down on a non-house hack investment purchase fourplex. Didn't find it. Didn't find a great deal. Didn't find a great deal. 2021, found a duplex. Bought the duplex because I was ready. A great deal popped up. So you have your search set up for your perfect house hack, but as you save and you start getting to that 10, 15, 20% saved, you are looking for a house hack and the great investment property, whichever one pops up first, because maybe you find one that would be a great investment, but you don't want to live there, right? It's just for some reason, that's not the place you want to live, but it's a great investment property as a rental. That's what you go for. So I wouldn't choose one over the other. I would shift my strategies as my options changed. Like the current house that I'm in, I had the 250, which became 300, became 400. It's a terrible problem as you have the income snowball. It hit $500,000. So I went to Portugal. I thought I'm going to go buy a property. Didn't want to buy there for a couple of fun reasons. Came back to the US and I thought, okay, instead of buying in Portugal, I'm going to buy a house hack in the US, all cash, or just buy one. And the cash flow from that property will fund when I go to Portugal or Thailand or Colombia or the Philippines or any place that doesn't hate Americans as much as America seems to. And that was what was going to fund it. So I purchased this place, all cash. Now it's a live-in burr, so it was a bunch of that, never doing that again, but I had to full rehab to do to make the cash flow from this place, a paid off property, fund my travels. I might even Airbnb the unit that I'm in when I travel. Maybe too lazy to make money because this live-in burr thing is making me $300,000 or so. I'm never doing it again. Not worth it. Would not have been worth it for $5 billion. That's how lazy I am. Because remember, and this is why it sounds funny when somebody says that, because you go, oh, that guy's just disconnected from reality, which is a great comment. Just put that back in there, whoever said that yesterday. When you don't have enough, money is the only thing. And once you have enough, money is just a thing. I talked about it at the very beginning of this video. I walked away from $2 million in golden handcuffs and don't care. Don't regret it. I wouldn't even think about it if I didn't mention it in video so that people knew the power of financial freedom means money doesn't matter. Because you have money coming in that I don't have to sell my life for 1 hour at a time, that's at least 4 times what it costs me to live the comfort level of life that I'm looking for. Don't care about money. Did this live in Burr? I'm retired. 8. I'm retired and want to try new things. So I tried it. Got the t-shirt and 50 tools that I don't want to use anymore. Native to Earth. Howdy, can I limit guests from coming over to my house hack in the lease? Yes. I want 1 overnight guest per week and daytime guests on the weekends. You can spell out anything you want in your lease that they will agree to. And mine, not the house hack, so not the house hack where I share the rooms. Conversations tend to solve that. But all of my rentals have it in the lease where if anybody is there longer than 5 days, their name has to be added to the lease. That stops multiple cars from building up in the driveway and too many people living there. But spell it out in the lease. And you actually have more rights when it's a house hack and you live in the shared living space with your tenants. You can actually, and check your local areas because there might be some, I like to use the R word. It's just what my family did. Can't take my words away from me. Because I got a R friend named Brian, and if somebody called him R, I'd murder that person. But a lot of things that people do are R. So if I offend you when I use the R word because it's a habit, I'll apologize now. I don't mind apologizing. I'm not going to change who I am, though. I did block the dingus that had a problem with the R word, though, so they don't have to hear it. Not sure why I got on that tangent. The water that makes my eyes water will help. Add it to your lease, check with your local laws. But since you live there, I forget what it's called. I keep wanting to call it like the Brady law, but that's like a gun-related DV law here. So there's a law that when you live there, you can actually discriminate against gender and I think even service animals or something below your local area. So you have more rights when it's somewhere that you live. Major Sags, howdy, good to see you there. Freedom Works, howdy. Dennis, YouTube Premium for the win. I know it's one of the things I've recommended to so many people. It's not, I mean, I get paid by YouTube, right? It took 3 years, but uh, I don't make any more money if you're on YouTube Premium, but I have YouTube Premium because it lets you listen with the app closed. And I have not heard a commercial in a decade. That's actually one of the other weird things I've had to do to retire early is never listen to a commercial. You're talking about people with master's degrees, years of experience in hypnosis and NLP to say things to get you to buy things you didn't know existed, but you know you can't live without. I only buy the things I want because I don't watch commercials. Lumberjack landlord, what's the point of having FU money if you never say FU? I warned everybody a minute ago. I'm gonna use the R word. So if you don't like the R word, don't have to be here. Stephen C. Howdy. Took back a message to make me lose sleep forever and ever and wonder about what was said. It's traumatizing. Janet. Howdy. If you want to enroll in the course for July, how much is the course? Should I go to your website? So maybe one of the moderators in the channel can stick the course in there. So the course is a one-time cost. It's not per month or anything like that. I think right now it's $447. It was more before. I'm going to cut it down to get these. And the course is not for July. I want to be really transparent here, Janet. The course is forever, right? As long as the course is up, you have access to it. And what I'm trying to do is every other month, anybody who's in the course, whether you signed up now or last year when I was in Portugal and the course came out, if you'll notice some of those were recorded in Portugal, we're doing live Zooms every week for a month, every other month. And we cover things that would be boring and just kill YouTube. Like I've mentioned NLP. What's that? I talk about mirroring. I talk about what business tools made me successful in real estate. That'd kill my YouTube channel. Like the members only. If we talked about looking at deals and that was what we did for an hour, YouTube would be like, wow, 7 people like this stuff. Not 20,000, which thank you all very much. That's a huge milestone. I appreciate every single one of you people who took the time to hit subscribe. Even the people who hit unsubscribe thinking that it irritated me, but you still watch my content because I see you there. And you. I need the romper room mirror. I see Johnny and Susan. Oh, there's an old person talking to you now. Stephen C. Have you ever been a private money lender? Kinda. Do you know if it's taxed as normal income or can you lend it out in your rental business and consider it passive income? Those are all great questions for a CPA. This is why I like live streams. So if anybody's ever wondered, I've said this in a couple. So if you watch a lot, you've heard this before. I like the live streams because it shows you what information to keep in top of mind awareness. If something, look at how many questions we've gone in to now. How far are we in recording? 1 hour and 9 minutes. To get to a question where I say the best thing to do in this situation is consult a professional. Almost every question up till now, so that I can open an MLS listing from my agent and I can look at a property and within 30 seconds, I know if I want to spend more time on this property or not. All of the information on reaching financial freedom and is work being optional, worth it and all that kind of stuff was answered. And there's a bunch of questions coming that I will answer. But when it comes to something nuanced like a tax thing or an investing strategy or how does a Roth conversion work, which Joe Kuhn just covered, all that, here's who you go talk to, right? I have not been a private money lender to the point where I made income. I have lent out. There was one time my brother went to a sheriff auction and I just gave him 40 grand so he could have the rest to buy because it's an all cash thing. And then he's paid me back when he felt like it. Remember, when you don't have enough, money's the only thing. Don't lend money to anybody. Once you have enough and it's just a thing, and it's just digits in a computer, then you do stupid stuff like that. Um, is that 9? I don't know if that one counted. I've got some friends who invest in notes. So if you're looking at doing private money lending, yes, there's a whole bunch of things to learn, but there's also the way to buy notes, platforms that sell them. So you get a financial instrument that is backed by an asset. You buy it. So it's like private lending. That's what I would look into first. I would look into note buying before I did private lending. Although private lending is an option. I actually had somebody reach out to me, I want to say less than a week ago, and basically said, "Hey, you want to do private lending, $150,000 or something?" And had I not been in the middle of this burr and had my funds tied up, this was one of the people I probably would have said, "Yeah, let me cut you a check. Let's write a contract, and right now we get everything in writing as to how things go and what's it going to be backed by." And I would not have hesitated. So it's something I would consider under the right situation, but I'm the lazy investor, and I learned one strategy that I could do while working full time without having a lot of money to lend out. And I never really did. I barely was able to scrape together the money for the down payments. And so think private money lending a new loan every couple of years for $10 or $20,000 was not going to get me retired in a decade. But if you make more, you could save more because you've kept your expenses low, don't have as many kids, maybe 2 incomes. That's completely viable. And I wouldn't say this if Joe hadn't actually said this in a comment. And so Joe Kuhn, I talk about him and his stocks. Mine was a 10-year journey. I didn't start until 40. I wanted to make work optional by 50 because my jobs kept getting taken away due to things outside of my control. The Marine Corps downsized after Desert Storm. Law enforcement downsized after the crash. Old Harbor Freight Lines went on strike when I was making $115,000 a year doing one of the easiest jobs I've ever had because that union I'm going to use the R word. Plug your ears if you don't like it. The Old Harbor Freight Lines union was retarded. So my pensions kept getting taken away. So I created my own in 10 years. Joe made more money, was financially more savvy for a longer time. And he said it was a 20 to 30-year journey versus my 10-year journey. Right. So I had a shorter timeline, a little more active, right? Real estate investing takes, how do I find tenants, screen tenants, place tenants, manage tenants? How do I find a property manager if you don't want to deal with tenants? How do you manage a property manager? Like there's all these things you have to learn and do, learn a market, hunt for deals. Like it's fairly not time consuming, 20, 30 minutes a day, but it's every day versus stock. You go, how much do I make every month that I can stick into this? And how do I diversify it? And how do I allocate it in the based on my time horizon? Less, I think, active, complete guess, because it's not the strategy I used. Comparing it to what I did, which I know was time consuming. Please don't ever think, to be very clear, to be naturally pedantic. Real estate investing is not passive. It is life consuming. Real estate ownership is very close to passive. 2 hours a month to manage 18 rental units. That's it. I've been tracking this whole year. Retired with 16, and the last 4 years, it had taken me 2 hours a month. If I have a tenant turnover, yeah, it's going to take 3 or 4 hours that month, but most months are only 30 minutes. I basically open the apps, answer one text question from a tenant, maybe, make sure the rents are paid. That's it. 2 hours a month on average is passive when you compare it to 50 to 60 hours a week per week to make a quarter of what I was making with the rentals. Good question, Stephen C. Let me know what you find out. Dennis, facts. Dividend Dave, there was the super chat. Opening journey. The Tam Bomb, howdy. Teachers can start summer camp programs at home. Parents need kids to be watched. There you go. That's a good suggestion. I love it. Michelle Meyer, I don't want to stop working, but I am having a hard time figuring out a passion. I still want to do something while I'm here in the US. Any tests that you know to help you figure it out? Silly question. No, it's a great question. It's called a CASAS test. Contact your local WorkSource office and ask for their CASAS test, or just go in and take one. You don't have to be on unemployment. Remember, the WorkSource office is not the unemployment center. It's where most people on unemployment go, but the WorkSource Center is based on America's job centers to help people become more employable. Doesn't mean employable. So you can go in, Michelle, and say, I'd like to take a CASAS test. And I'm probably spelling that wrong, but they'll have you sit down, take a test, and it'll say, based on your answers, here's the fields that you might excel in. And it'll give you some new ideas to think. Another thing you can do is go to onet.com, onetonline.com, onetonline.com, and look up job descriptions for different jobs and see of all the skills that they do, you might be surprised at how many you have in different fields. And then you might think there's a field listed there that you haven't considered before. But a CASAS test at work source, I bet you didn't think I was going to have an answer for you, did you, Michelle? But there you go. It's a great question. Ice transport. Howdy. Trying to buy a small house in a good area next to university. 3 and 2 with one attached garage. Was built in 1953. Price around 230. Rent will be 25 to 26. Would you consider buying an older house? I have a 1921 and a 1939. I'm in a 1939. Although you can't tell because it was redone in like the 80s. And I just redid the other unit, and most of the stuff in this unit. So yes, if I'm going to buy an older property, I consider a few things. First, before 1979, you can have lead and asbestos. So what are your exit plans if you have that? Or what is your remediation plan if you have that? Second, when were the updates done? Does it have knob and tube? Does it have plumbing that needs to be fully replaced? What would the cost of those be? Just a rough estimate, and that could impact my ability to buy. If the updates were done and those things don't exist, then I'm more likely to buy it. Most of my properties were 1980 or newer. It's kind of my preference, but I've bought two that were older because they were great deals. So if it's a great deal, and if you're looking at 230, rent would be 25 to 26. Is that rent around the university, or is that rent per room around the university, which is a great strategy close to universities? I have a friend, Jai, that does that up near Bellingham. I haven't talked to him in years, and I really only know him through a mastermind. I would buy an older house. Yes, hope that answers the question. Consider all of those factors. Have a home inspection done. Contact insurance companies to make sure you can find a policy, because right now, what insurance companies are doing. Did I make this video or did I just think this video? I love my memory. Look up, there's a post-it. It's Tuesday. You're doing a live stream. Here we are. 10. Working on that. I can't garden all day. Michelle, there is so much more to do than gardening. You won't have time to garden. You'll wonder how you thought you would ever do a garden. Dividend Dave with the dad jokes. Let us get back to real estate investing and leave the puns alone. I want to see if the universe implodes if my son Cameron and Dave get in the same room together. Freedom works. If you think the first 5 years of your wealth journey is difficult, try being poor in another country, any other country. Yeah, and longer than 5 years. I talk often about how if you want to really irritate a wealthy person, just tell them how lucky they are. Right? You go to Michael Zuber and just say, oh, you're so lucky. You've got 180 something rentals and you pay more in property management fees than most people make in a year, right? It's see his face turn red when you call him lucky. I'm sure he would love to hear that. This is a hot button, right? Any successful person's hot button. But I like Neil deGrasse Tyson. He broke this down. Don't like his political views, love his science views. He goes, think of how lucky you are to be born, right? The ancestors you had to have, the genetics that had to happen, the billions of cells that had to come together to make you. Just the idea that you have the luck that was there. Then you were born in a country that has 30-year fixed rate debt that runs on capitalism, so you can be rewarded for what you do. Like the luck to be born in that country. There are people right now born in the UK. Right now, I'm not going to compare UK with a place where you can't get ahead. I'm sure people in the UK do it all the time, but you don't have 30-year fixed rate debt very often. If you have fixed rate debt, they've tricked you in the UK to thinking you have fixed rate debt with 5-year resetting loans. Adjustable rate mortgages is probably 50% of what caused the 2008 worldwide housing crash. And you guys still have them. That's why commercials seeing such pain right now. You have $160 million properties selling for $48 million because of the debt. How lucky are you if you're born in a country that lets you advance, that actually has a tax incentive program that says, our government says, we don't want employees. Actually, we don't want employees so much, we're going to tax you about 40%. We don't want you to be an entrepreneur either. We don't want you to be a plumber, You're an electrician, a dentist, run your own company. No, we'll tax you at 60%. But if you run a business, we like businesses, we're only going to tax you 20%. And if you want to invest, put your money to work, provide housing, the thing we needed as a country, we're going to tax you zero. We're going to let you, specifically you, Dion, make $132,000 last year and carry forward a loss so you can write off losses against next year's income if you want. How lucky are we? Yeah, there's some luck involved. But that luck is there for everybody. And luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So if you aren't getting prepared, you're going to say other people are lucky instead of you, right? Michelle came from a country, invested in the US, had appreciation and cash flow add up over years, did a 1031 into some duplexes, now owns more rentals, has more tax benefits, has had a close to $1 million sale and paid no taxes because of our 1031 policy. How lucky is Michelle to live in a country that has a 1031 program? Everyone else lives there too, that's in that country. But are they doing 1031s? Are they buying a property and letting years happen to get the appreciation, the principal pay down, the tax benefits? There is luck involved, but you have to grab it by the tail. Old guy REI with a super chat. Howdy, Frank. How are you? I grew up on Romper Room, still waiting for my name to be called. Yeah, I tried being Dion. Never seen a keychain with my name on it. That wasn't the girl version with an N-E at the end. Thank you for the super chat. It's appreciated. Frank, how would you like to be during a live stream with me on a Tuesday? This is your invitation. Let me know. I see Wealth Building Journey gifted a financial freedom membership to, I don't see who. There it is. To Martin Properties. Awesome. And we'll see Josh there next month. Next week. Not next week. 2 weeks from now. So, yes, next week. 1 week from now. Members only meeting next Tuesday, 6 o'clock. Next Wednesday, there's a school event that Zuber's putting together. I will know more about that later in the week, and maybe he'll announce it during his late daily updates. Kurt, howdy. If you were just starting out and you can't house hack, but you pull out about 200,000 in equity, what would be your buy box? So you can't house hack, 200,000 buy box. Do you own rentals? Do you have any rental? No, you said just starting out. Okay, so you don't have it. So getting the first rental is going to be the challenge for 2 years. You got to get the rental income on your tax returns to offset the debt to income issue that you're probably going to run into. But check with lenders. Some will start right away. Some will do it in a year. But most lenders, it's 2 years of tax returns. So I'd continue to work in the same field. So I'm not changing jobs. I'd continue to save. Personally, I would look for a small multifamily, maybe up to 10 units using 11. Convoy Home Loans has a loan product up to 10, so maybe 8 units, fixed rate debt, DSCR loan to buy a multifamily. That would be my buy box in an area, but your debt to income ratio doesn't matter with DSCR. Your down payment's more important. Your credit score matters. Where is that at? What can you do to get your credit score high? If it's not above 780 right now, I'd be working on it. And even above 780, I still can constantly make sure that it's staying good there. I would prefer a higher cost of living area to invest because my goal was not a lot of units, right? If I wanted a lot of units, I could invest in Gary, Indiana, the 320,000 that I've invested over a decade. Instead of 18 units, I would have 30 or 40, right? Millennial Mike has 27 after 5 years of investing, and I don't even know that he has put as much money to work as I did. So he's killing it, but he wants a big portfolio. I wanted the right amount of cash flow from the least amount of units. So I'm not investing in a high cost of living area because of appreciation. I've actually never touched it. No cash out refinance, no HELOC, no sell for 1031. I'm about cash flow. So if you can find a market where you have the most important metric, which is trusted boots on the ground, either you live there or you used to live there and you know the good and bad areas, or you have somebody who you think is going to come to your funeral who lives there and is in the industry, agent, lender, contractor, somebody that you trust, another investor to be your trusted boots on the ground, that picks the market. So once you've picked your market, I would study that market, figure out what asset class is best, right? I've got friends who invest in Ohio and they're doing single family homes with a great return. In Washington, I have not seen a single family home with a return, period. Good return, period. I haven't seen any that would positively cash flow. The one that I have that's paid off is positive cash flow because I bought it 1 billion years ago, right? So if we go back in time, great. Can't do that though. To buy one now, it would be 20 years before it would cash flow. Not my plan. So what works in that market? Someone is successing there successfully. Find the investor that's doing it, figure out what they're doing, target that. Whether it's single family, small multifamily, I would be looking at fixed rate debt, whatever your debt to income ratio can handle or your down payment can handle with the DSCR loan. DSCR loan, they also do look at your net worth. They usually want your net worth to be 50% or sometimes 100% of what you're borrowing. So that can be a factor if you're just starting out. I think the main thing to add to a strategy if you're just starting out is to set your decade goals. Most of our friends are planning for the weekend. I'm planning for 2034 today, still a decade from now. What am I doing? What's it going to look like in 10 years? If you plan on putting $200,000 to work and you don't see a big return in 1 or 2 years, you're going to be frustrated and you're probably not going to continue. But if you put the 200,000 to work and in a couple of years you've stabilized your properties, you're continuing to save for the next one, and you know that you still have now 8 years to go, you're more than likely going to follow through. What does a decade look like if you have $200,000 to start and you're just starting out? That puts you in the graduating class of 2034. That's what I would do. All of the other things, yes, but I would also think decades, not years. TPL, Section 8. Next month, closing on an inherited tenant. Lease auto renews end of July. Will I have to wait until next year this time to propose increase, or is it midterm possible? So lease automatically renews. You're the new owner. You are bound by the current existing lease. If it is written into the lease that it renews, it's possible that you could be. If you can say we need to speak about the lease, let's say it renews, you said end of July. So August 1st is the new lease. You go in and I'm not sure where you live, TPO, but I'm in Washington, and in Washington you have to give 60 days notice for a rent increase. And a lot of the cities are now going to 90 days or 6 months of notice for a rent increase. So what I would do if I was going to re-sign the lease, now it's going to be automatic. What if you've gone to the fair market rent website? How much will Section 8 pay in that area? How far off are you? How far off are you from area average rents? Because area average rents set rents, not what your rents are, not what you want to go to, not what your expenses are. And I can prove that your expenses don't set rents. If somebody has a paid off rental and somebody has a rental with $1 million mortgage, they rent for the same. Expenses don't set rents. Area average rents do. So once you figure out that, if you're far off of that, let's say you can go in and renegotiate a new lease starting August 1st, you have a new lease, but you have to give 60 days or 90 days notice. August and September would probably be the same rent. In the lease, it would be written that October 1st, the new rent starts, the new amount of the rent. Learn your local laws, right? In Washington, I would say Google your RCWs, learn your revised codes of Washington when it comes to landlord-tenant laws and what is required, and then look at your municipality, right? When you contact your attorney, you can ask some questions like how much notice is required to vacate, you're going to do a rehab, vacate, you're going to sell the property, vacate, you're going to move in. How much time is required for a rent increase? Is there rent control in your state? If there is rent control in your state, like California, does it impact your property? Because if you own a single family or a duplex in your own name, it's not rent controlled. But in an LLC, now you're rent controlled. If you're in Oregon and you're house hacking a small multifamily, it's not rent controlled. But if you move out and it is just a small multifamily, it can be rent controlled. So you got to learn the nuanced laws local to you to know what to do. If you renew the lease, the way it works in my state, and I think most states, but confirm, you sign the lease with your tenant, whatever you and the tenant agree to. Then you go to the housing authority and you show them the lease for them to renew the contract, because that's not a lease, it's contract. More likely to get their approval if you already have a signed lease with the tenant. And I send in, here's a screenshot of fair market rents and what you're willing to pay. And if you're above that by up to 10%, I send a screenshot of them allowed to do a variance of up to 10% higher if there's a shortage of units in their market. Then I'll send in screenshots of area averages, area average comparables. Section 8 doesn't look at garages, swimming pools, storage sheds, parking, any of that. They only look at bedroom count, not bathroom count, bedroom count. And it has to be a legal bedroom. It has to have a closet, two ways in and out, has to be a certain square footage, source of heat, power, all the things that can be required for it to be a bedroom. So when you look up, you said the size of it here? No. So if you have a 2 or a 3 bedroom, you only look up comparables of 2 or 3 bedrooms that are at what you're trying to increase it to or above to send in, do the work for the county employee. It could be a nonprofit, but most places it's the housing authority. Send them the work and say, here's all of the reasons why the rent is going to what it's at. You can't say property taxes went up, homeowners insurance went up, I have to charge more. They don't care about that. Area average rents, set rents, even for Section 8. I've had an email from Section 8 saying 1,800 is the most we'll go on a house. I sent in fair market rents, the 10% variance, area comps at 2,400, went to 2,200 and they agreed. That house is now at 3,000. That doesn't suck. But you can do leases with planned increases in the future. So if you have to give a certain amount of notice, you make the increase after the notice. Angel R. Howdy. How have you? Have a tenant saying she's not in a good place mentally and wants out of the lease. What would you do? Explain, well, be human when possible, but don't be walked on. If somebody has a death in the family or their spouse passes away and they want to break a lease, absolutely. I've got a young couple that just purchased a house. So if they want to move out and break the lease, ain't going to hold them to the lease or make their life harder. If you have a lease, what does the lease say? And what would a property management company do? A lot of leases and the law in Washington allows us to say, okay, you continue to rent the place until the end of the lease, but I have to try to fill it. So once you move out, I will try to fill it. And as soon as it's filled, you don't have to pay rent anymore. So is that what your lease says? I don't do that. I put in my leases, there's a lease termination fee of basically 1 month's rent or less. So don't make it more than a month's rent. That could violate some laws too. So if a tenant wants out of a lease, they're just going to pay me 1 month's extra rent. I usually am happy to have tenant turnover. It depends on where their rent is. Area average rents are going up so much that the new rent's going to be more. So I'm okay with that. I tell them I'm willing to work with them. You are going to try to rent it out as soon as you can. What does your lease specifically say? And you can send them screenshots of the part of the lease that covers it. You say, I understand you need to get out of your lease. That's why we have this provision in here to get you out of it. Remember, the lease was here to protect you. If I sold the property, you were still bound by this same lease. I couldn't shut off your property. I couldn't remove the doors. There was all kinds of parts of this lease to protect you. There are parts of the lease here to protect me too, meaning you have to pay until I rent it, or you have to pay this lease termination fee. And then see how creative they get with their reasoning. Globe guy, howdy. With the keypad deadbolts, do you give them a key? Nope. Or do they just use the code, just the code? Also, is battery replacement on them or the landlord? It's on the tenant in the lease. Been a while and don't remember if you talk about it. Yep, I probably talk about it in the what locks do I use for my rentals. So the reason I don't give them a key is because there's 2 exterior doors, at least. They each get a coded lock. I do have one rental that has 3 exterior doors. They all 3 coded locks. I keep the keys. I don't even know if I have them anymore. They're here somewhere. If I ever had one break, I'd probably just go use one of the other doors to get in to take it out. Right? I wouldn't even need to drill. The idea is even if a battery dies, you have 2 doors. And when those batteries start to die, they start to make weird sounds. They beep different, they beep slower. They have like a month to know, okay, the battery's dying. And then when it does die, they have the other door to go in and out. I will show them. It pops off the top. You put the battery, it's a 9-volt square battery. I've not, and then if I have a tenant turnover or whenever I go in to do 12, whenever I go in to do fire, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, batteries, I will leave a battery for the door. And when I have tenant turnover, I'll do new batteries. Jason, Section 8 finally approved me. Should be getting direct deposit in a couple of days. Only took 5 months. Make sure you have reserves before pulling the trigger. Yes, that. So I work in a county, Pierce County, not to name anybody names, but Pierce County, Washington sucks, and I will not own a Section 8 rental there. Thurston County, it's amazing. Happy with my Section 8 tenants there. How long did it take to get approved? 4 days. 4 days to get Section 8 approval. Tenant moved out. Day after Christmas, I remember this, 26th of December. New tenant was in by January 1st. Approved by Section 8 in 4 days. They came and they did the inspection. There was a couple of issues. One of the issues, this is how good Thurston County is to work with. One of the issues was behind the refrigerator. And Curtis, you just had this in Pierce County. Didn't go the same way as it did with me. Actually, yours was Lakewood City, not Section 8. Behind the refrigerator, there was no electric plate. I had not looked back there. I didn't know there was one, or it had a break or something. The inspector went out to her truck, got one, and brought it in and swapped it out. And then there was there's a weather stripping on a door and a couple of other things to fix. And she was willing to allow me to do an email of a video after the repair was done to give approval. So 5 months sounds like you're in a place I don't know that I would be adding more units to. Bill, howdy. Native to Earth, just found out that having an iPhone means certain smaller YouTube channels don't show the join button. Yeah, sometimes you have to go and do it on a laptop. That's where the join button is. It's a little frustrating. Robert, howdy. The answer I have no idea how much money I need to retire early. It all depends on how much a house and 50 acres of land cost me. That depends on what the price and interest rates are then. True, if that's what your retirement is, because that's one of the bigger questions of retirement too, is what do you want your retirement to look like? How much? So part of it is cash flow, but what do you want your living situation to be? Right. I retired. I was retired for 1 or 2 years. Retired in 2022. 2023, I bought this. So I was retired for 1 year when I bought this. It was because it was on the water, walking distance to downtown, where all the, I want to say restaurants, but bars are, and the ferries to go to Seattle to eat on the waterfront. It's like all right here, great view on the water. So the layout of the property contributed to me buying it in retirement. What do you want? You want where do you want your house with 50 acres? That could determine price too. Thank you, Wealth Building Journey. Those are the two things exactly. Robert, the answer is I have to have enough to retire in 10 more years or less. I think I will fail one of my goals because my health won't be good enough. That health is the one we can't control. We can contribute to, but can't control it. And 13, I have someone fairly close to me going through some health concerns and had to have the conversation of, when I leave here today and I'm on my way driving home, I can be unalived on that trip. It could end anytime for all of us. So that's why a 10-year goal for me made sense. If I had to work for 40 years to retire, if it was the only option, why even bother thinking about retirement? Just work until you die. But if there is a shorter way, 10 to 30 years, somewhere in there, depending on your strategy, it's worth pursuing. Angel R, favorite place to travel, Medellin or Cartagena? Didn't go to Medellin. Heard it was an expat territory, and I've seen enough Americans, been around them, wasn't looking for them. Loved Cartagena. I went to Isla de Piratas. Spent a week there, which was great because you'd have the ships of new people that came every day to spend time on the island, but left every day. Most of them. I might go to Medellin next time. I'm trying to think, where did I like in Colombia the most? I probably would go back to Cartagena, although I want to go to the salt mines in Bogota. But yeah. Favorite place to travel? For scuba, Koh Tao, Thailand. For entertainment, Khao Phanong, Thailand, for the 3-day full moon party. Portugal was okay, not my favorite. And then my chat moved. Jason, I am trying to stop saying, I used to pick on people when I did interviews working at the CDL school. I would have a resume in front of me and my pen, I would check the side of their paper. Average in a five, I'm not counting that one, in a 5-minute interview was close to 100. I had an employee that only got 72, and she's actually still working for the company. She's one of the management people now. 72 in a 5-minute interview. And I'm trying to do better than 20 in an hour. So Michelle, I find golf very boring. I've tried miniature golf with the appropriate amount of liquid. Miniature golf can be fun. If you go to Leavenworth, Washington, I like to stay at the Enzian Inn, get the tower room. It's great. But they've got a 9-hole miniature golf across the street you can walk to. It's great. Wayne, howdy. Freedom works. Boring is sexy. It absolutely is, when boring is what makes work optional. I have 11 doors, but low cash flow. Any ideas? I made a video not too long ago. I could probably maybe put a link in the chat. 17 ways to make more money without raising the rents. Yeah, I would look at that. And then how long have you owned the 11? And where do you own them? Right? In Gary, Indiana, 11 rentals is not going to cash flow very much. So it's a start of a good portfolio. 11 doors in Washington can be over $10,000 a month in profit, right? So depends on where you're at. I'm not looking for the largest portfolio. I'm looking for the right amount of cash flow for the least amount of units. The Cliff Notes version, and I don't remember these well enough to do the whole video. Have you called your insurance and asked if you can raise your deductible to lower your premiums? Have you shopped around for other insurance? Are you familiar, Brian, with the binder strategy on getting your tenants to ask you to raise the rent? I would probably do that, although that video is specifically targeting things you can do to increase income without raising the rent. That is one of the best options. I will have to look for that, and I will put it in a. There you go. Chester's my hero. He put a link to that in there. After this live stream, that's where you click. Brett, Nalair, and JMC, howdy. Question, JMC. I won't have enough reserves to do down payment for about 1 to 2 years. Do you think 1 to 2 years from the difficulty in getting into real estate, it would be extremely harder compared to today? This is a great question, and it would take an hour to answer in depth. But so I wish somebody was here to ring a bell. I'm going to try to keep this to just a couple minutes. I've been alive a half a century. I have not seen 1 year where everyone wasn't screaming that this is the hardest time in history to ever buy a property. And I have absolute proof that it is exactly as hard today to buy a house as it was in 1970, before I was born. I can prove it. Everyone says wages are only going up so much and home prices went up so much more. Right. Well, in 1970, we didn't have 30-year fixed rate debt. 30-year mortgages didn't exist. And in the 80s, you had 18% interest mortgages. In 2020, we had 3% interest mortgages. In the 70s and earlier, we had single family incomes. Since then, we have dual family incomes. We have a lot of dinks. Dual income, no kids. I purchased a house in 2000. Here's my proof that housing is just as affordable now as it was back then. I purchased a house in 2000 for, I'm going to say $100,000. It was $98,000. They wrapped in $4,000 in closing costs so that I would walk away from the closing table with a check for $1,200. So I basically paid $100,000 for a house. It's in a little town called Yelm, Washington, and it would now sell for about $400,000. So wages have not gone up 4 times since 2020, since 2000. Like they've gone up a lot, but not 4 times. So then that house is obviously unaffordable, right? Well, let's look at the physics of this. I purchased a house in a town that had 36,000 people, 1 blinking red light, no movie theater, a 45-minute drive to the closest grocery store, dial-up Wi-Fi, because T1 hadn't been moved in out there yet, no fiber optic cables. Every time there was a windstorm, you had no internet. But now people want a walkability score. They want to buy a $100,000 house in a place that has a Walmart, that has a Safeway, that has a movie theater. All of the things that Yelm has today, where the house costs $400,000. You go find a place in the state that you live that's 45 minutes from the closest grocery store, has one blinking red light, no movie theater. You'll find $100,000 houses all freaking day long with 30-year fixed rate debt. It's just as hard today to buy a house as it was 20 years ago, as it was 50 years ago. It's never been easy, and it's always a new frustration. Last year, I made videos and talked with people who wanted a triplex or a fourplex, but I don't want to use FHA loans. It'd be a really bad loan price. It's not for people starting out. That's for people with bad credit and bad debt to income ratios. And it was really the only option, unless you saved up a huge down payment. And then November 18th, last year, 2023, they came out with a new program that nobody predicted coming, where you can buy duplex, triplex, fourplex with 5% down. In 2 years, what program is going to come out that makes it maybe easier to buy than it was 2 years ago? 2 years ago, buying a fourplex. I bought one in 2020. I had to come up with 20% down. Could have done less down, I think, but I did 20% down because I had it. But now you can do 5% down on a fourplex. That didn't exist 2 years ago. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 years. What will be best to do, JMC, is to continue to save. And as you save, your options change. Keep learning your market, study your thing. It's going to be your next down payment is 1 to 2 years from now. But if you're going to the investor meetups and you're looking online and you find the deal, and you might run into somebody that is ready for that owner finance that doesn't need a lot down because they're trying to avoid the capital gains at this point for owner financing, you won't see that deal if you're not looking every day. Maybe only 15 minutes a day is all you look, and maybe you only go to one meetup a month, but you're doing that in those 1 to 2 years while you save the down payment. I don't think it'll be harder in 2 years. I don't think it'll be easier in 2 years. I think it's going to be so hard. Everybody says now is the hardest time to ever buy a place. In 2020, I bought two. End of the world was happening, and everybody was like, oh, they shut down businesses. Nobody can go to work. Nobody has to pay rent, and you can't evict them. So I bought a fourplex and a triplex because of interest rates and what was happening to rents. Right? It was a rent freeze. What do you think happens after a rent freeze? Landlords panicked. The next year, we had a 40% rent increase. My tenants asked for a 20 was the lowest, 28% was the highest rent increase because the area average was 40. They were getting a good deal. So I think you're in a great position just knowing that you have 1 to 2 years to save the down payment because you can continue to save. Normally I don't answer texts, but I saw Zuber was texting me during my live stream. So that's great. He actually noticed my last video did pretty well. I appreciate it. He sees stuff like that. 3 years before I had a video go viral, which was viral to me, right? Most of my videos got 1 to 2,000 views. I had one that got 20,000 views when I was on my cruise. I re-released one that got 20,000. That was huge. And then finally this couple months ago or so, I had the one do 112,000 views. So that was great. Now I can get every now and then I'll get one to do 10 to 20,000, which is really cool. I appreciate every comment, every like, every time you share. It's helping the channel grow, getting this information to more people. And the fun thing of that, don't get me wrong, this is the fun thing, is the way YouTube works is it shows your content to people who've subscribed. It says, hey, Frank and Michelle and Dave and everybody, here's what Dion did today. Would you like to look at it? If you see the thumbnail and you skip by it, it kind of says, oh, they don't like the thumbnail, so maybe don't show it to anybody else. But if you see the thumbnail and you click on it and then you watch the whole video, YouTube says, oh, people who watch this content like it. So let's try people who watch retiring and investing stuff. Some of them will watch it. If they don't, the video dies. If they watch it, then it goes, oh, let's try a ring of people who want to retire, maybe not retire early, or people who want to invest but don't invest in real estate. So it's a new group of people where the doomers and gloomers and crash bros all hang out, and you get all of the negative comments that come in that feed my soul. All of the reasons and excuses why nobody can do this, and all of you are doing it. Look at my comments for the last 2 or 3 weeks, Michelle, and think of how many people are saying it's absolutely impossible to do anything with real estate, and you just did a 1031 and grabbed 2 new properties. But it's absolutely impossible. Nobody can do it. Or how can a school teacher purchase a triplex? It's in Lakewood, Washington. So it's not like it's in the middle of nowhere. It is right next to JBLM, like one of the largest military installations on the West Coast. And it was purchased by a school teacher. How's that even possible? Nobody can do that. That's what the comments are saying while you're doing it. So that was a great question, JMC, and I think you're in a great position. Brian, chat moved. Oh no. I saw your name. Nowhere to go to. There we go. Wolf Building Jr., there are 2 single-family rentals and duplexes in Washington and Idaho. Bought 2 single-family rentals before COVID. Bought the rest between 2020 and 2023. Good job. Nice. Taking action when a lot of people ducked their head in the sand, playing ostrich. And then Dividend Knave took back a message to make me lose sleep tonight. The join button for Dion's channel shows up when you sacrifice a goat. That also works to get cigarette smell out of your house. It's step number 4. I think it was Angel R who called me the cabrita, the little girl goat. JMC, what's better? High cost of living, higher appreciation. I don't go for appreciation. Higher rents versus low cost of living, low appreciation potential, and lower rents. They both get you to end result of FI. Where do you have trusted boots on the ground? I invest locally where I'm at, so I'm the trusted boots on the ground. Millennial Mike does great because he piggybacked off Mark Matsky's, investing at a distance. If I was going to go to at a distance, I would have used his. That one counts. 14 systems, his people in place to have trusted boots on the ground. So that's high cost of living versus low cost of living. Where do you live? It's best to learn the skills in your backyard, even if then you have to take them because your area doesn't work. I would house hack in a high cost of living area. I didn't want to invest in Washington because the appreciation was better. I wanted to invest in Washington because they cost more. So if a 10% yield, let's say I'm shooting for a 10% yield, and I can find it in Washington, and I put $60,000 to work, that means I have $6,000 in income coming in a year. Now I go to Gary, Indiana. I put $60,000 to work. He gets a 20% return, but now he has property management and some other things. But maybe his 20% is actual cash on cash returns, twice as much, right? It would feel like it would be twice as much. But my 60,000 here is levered depreciation. I don't have any tax increment 15. Any tax increment coming from this because I'm writing off $6 million worth of depreciation over the years, right? Versus the 60,000 invested in Gary. Where's your best tax benefits at? Where you're going to have better leverage? I've done probably a dozen shows. I don't call them shows, real estate meetups where I'm invited to present. So the Robin Hood Resort, the Northwest Action Summit, which was in Portland and then Vancouver, the One Rental at a Time event, right? All of the local meetup groups where I come and talk. And I've done these presentations with Millennial Mike. Here's how much I think that there is no difference. I want to use the Socratic method of debate. Now, we haven't done this yet because it's going to take some practice, but I want to go to an event where I explain Mike's strategy to his satisfaction. That's the Socratic method. And then he explains my strategy to my satisfaction. I will explain why he invests out of state, why he house hacks a high cost of living area. So if you're in a high cost of living area, you should at least be doing that. But then why he should invest out of state, the benefits to his systems, the reasons, the exponential growth he'll experience. And then I want him to explain why I chose the high cost of living area, what the benefits are, and why appreciation wasn't the thing I was looking for. So the answer, JMC, is neither's better. I'll also take it a step further. Zuber says this when somebody asks him the question, what would you buy, a single family house, a small multifamily house, or a multifamily property? And he says, the one with the best yield. It's kind of like, okay, can I say this? Can I clean this up for YouTube? There's, I'll gender switch. There's a rich woman who wants to choose between 3 men to marry. She gives each man $5,000 and says, come back to me in a month and show me what you've done with this $5,000. And I'm going to pick who I'm going to marry. So the first person goes out and he really wants to get married. So he buys a bunch of stocks but diversifies it. So some might take off, some might lose money. And he comes back in a month with $6,000. The second person goes out and does flipping couches, buys stuff to sell it, buys stuff, doubles his money, comes back in a month and has $10,000. The third person, who is risk averse, buried the money for a month, put it in the bank, not touched it, brought back, said, I protected what you gave me and I brought you the $5,000. So she married the best looking one. Dennis, have you ever been in a situation where you have a good friend that's a real estate agent, but they don't understand investing? I need some advice how to gently not use them for investment. I'm happy to use them for a VA loan purchase, though. I have a close friend of several decades who owned a real estate agency, had 19 agents working for him. He had 30 rentals. So he's an agent who understands investing, but he had never invested the way I did. He invested over decades, cherry picking the best deals that came in through the door, basically using cash, never had a mortgage. Invested in single family houses, not small multifamily. So when I started using him, the first few properties he had me make offers on would have bankrupted me because I didn't do the work. I didn't know how to run ROI. I didn't know what aspects would help limit tenant turnover. I didn't know how to tell A, B, C neighborhoods. I didn't know all the stuff I needed to educate myself that you need to learn, not the agent. I'll use as a matter of fact, the agent that I went to after him, like, got his license the day we started making offers. So I didn't care about their skills. I knew what I was bringing to the table. So I would work with an agent that's not good as long as they listen and do what I want them to. So my friend would have bankrupted me. Luckily, the first couple of deals he had me making offers on, I didn't get. Then I learned the skills, found BiggerPockets, learned the one rental at a time strategies before I found Zuber's book. So I wish I'd found him 5 years sooner. It would have been a little easier. I purchased two properties through that agent. And then I told him, I said, I don't have a problem with you. I'm having multiple agents set up my searches. I'm looking in different markets. If that's okay with you, great. If that's not okay with you, then we don't have to work together anymore. Let's not mix friends in business. He was fine with it. And the next 5 deals went through that guy that, like, I'm telling you, he got his license. And then the next week we were making offers together. And it was me who brought the skills to the table, not the agent. So how would I do it if it's the friend? As you educate yourself and you learn how to run the cash on cash return. If you're investing in real estate, so Dennis, and I hope to find out this throughout the course with you, but what are you investing in? Single family, small multifamily, right? If you're doing 5+ units with a net operating income loan revaluation period, and your agent talks about the cap rate, okay, great. But if you're buying a duplex or a triplex or a single family house and your agent says, well, the cap rate is blah, 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 you stop talking to that agent because they don't have a freaking clue how real estate works investing in residential. Cap rate is not applied to residential real estate. It's applied to multifamily real estate. So some simple litmus test like that can tell you, is your friendship worth losing a bunch of money? If you say, because there's this shift, Dennis, that I'm going to go over in several videos. For the last decade, finding real estate really came down to speed. I wanted to make offers quick, get an offer in before the seller realized they were going to get a bunch of offers. And then when they got better offers and they accepted that one, I would send an email saying, hey, if that offer falls through, mine's still good. It's like, put me in second position. I got half my portfolio that way. That worked for a decade. Well, it didn't work for the last few years. What shifted now is I started watching days on market. Something sits long enough to the seller is not getting the price that they want, or there's something wrong with the property that somebody else is not willing to fix. And once it's been on the market longer than, like, 3 times longer than what was normal for the area, I make a really low offer. I made a 80% offer on the property, and I stayed firm on the last one that I got, and even more off on the other one that I got accepted and backed out on. That's the shift. Days on market versus speed. So if I went to my agent and I said, I found a property, it's been on the market 70 days, normal for our area is like 15. It's listed for 500. I want to offer 400. And my agent said, "Ooh, that's low. I don't want to insult them." Find a new agent. Right? You understand the system. You can take the time to justify, say, I totally get that that's a low offer, but look how many days it's been on market, and look at what average days on market is you're educating them as an investing buyer. It's very different than a home buyer because agents want to work with home buyers. There's 4 tiers of people who buy real estate who will pay. The person who will pay the most is a home buyer because they buy based on payment. Second person who will pay the most is investor. We pay based on yield. The third will be the flippers who buy based on what is it? Sweat equity. There's another term for it. Forced appreciation. And then there's wholesalers that will buy based on the margin of sellers' needs versus what somebody will pay. So the agent wants to work because they're based on a percentage of commission with the people who sell the most. So most agents tend to work with home buyers. Smart agents work with investors because they know it's repetitious business. Do the litmus tests on a couple things that matter to you before saying, hey, I can't work with you anymore. And then when you do say, look, I have to go work with somebody else, you can justify it by saying, I totally get it. You're a great agent. You work with home buyers. I'm looking for somebody who works with investors, and this person fits my needs. And if it costs you the friendship, would you really care? Something I learned with my family. So and I talk about this because I'm so lazy. I joined the Marine Corps because that was easier work than being in my family's line of business. They all run tree services. My dad, my two brothers ran tree services. One brother in California still does. As a family, I was the youngest manual slave labor of the tree service industry, and all of our friends would call. This is how my dad taught me. This is how you tell a friend from a friend, because they're both friends, but they're different types. Friends will call and say, hey, you run a tree service. What kind of discount can you give me? Or what weekend can you come over with your tools and I'll do a barbecue and you do for like $5,000 worth of work to my trees and I'll throw a barbecue for you. Those are your friends. Other friends call and they say, you have a tree service, right? Can you give me an estimate on this? Just give me an estimate because they're going to use your business like a fair. And even if your price is close or maybe a little bit above other estimates, you're going to get the job and you're going to get a tip because that's the friends you want to be. If your agent is only your friend because they're going to make a commission off you in the future, do you want them to be your friend? JMC, high cost of living, higher leveraged ROI per dollar invested. That is one of the metrics. I did say if I didn't find my deal I was looking for, I set a timeline on it within a year. This is a good, thank you for the reminder there, Chester. Zuber talks about this too from one rental at a time. He says he was stuck in his spreadsheet for 6 months to a year and he learned the skill of looking, but then he went out and found Fresno and he put the skill to work. It was 2.5 hours away, right? So it was out of his market. If you study your high cost of living area or your low cost of living area and nothing seems to make sense, then you go shift to the other one. But do it for 60 days to 6 months to make sure you've learned the skill in your backyard and then you take it to where it makes sense. I think we'll be wrapping up here pretty close. Michelle Meyer, it's a Three Amigos video. Here's a good video about increasing cash flow. Thank you for putting that there because I did that the same week I did the video. Awesome. Because you are so kind. So maybe we can connect. Michael, maybe we can connect. I have been saying I want to move to Florida for years. I enjoyed Florida. Middle class. Why is it harder for wages to go up than it is for inflation to go up? Because wages cause inflation. You give $20 an hour to somebody working in a burger joint, and the burger's got to go from $14 to $22. So the rising tide lifts all boats. I'm not against or for the minimum wage. That's not what I'm saying. But in 2020, we had a massive wage increase. We had people that could sit at home, collect income, get stimulus checks, go on unemployment. On unemployment in Washington State, we were making $75,000 a year on unemployment because you got unemployment, extra unemployment, extended unemployment, and stimulus. And most of the people making $75,000 a year weren't making $50,000 a year before going on unemployment. Then you have all the stimulus ballers who can buy stuff, and look what happens to inflation. So inflation happens because of wages. It's not the other way around. So wages can never catch up to inflation because the more wages that there are, the more inflation there will be. So the way to have your wages beat inflation is to not sit in the same dead-end job for years. So a lot of the Gen Xers out there, myself, I know a lot of people go, oh, look at the boomer. It's got to, no, Gen X, because we hate everybody equally. We use the R word. We irritate people. You're just going to have to deal with it. Threw off the emperor's groove. Beware the groove. Gen Xers were trained by their boomer and greatest generation parents and grandparents that longevity at a company would be rewarded, right? We had a country where you make a farm, you have a bunch of kids, so that when you can't work, your kids take over. Then the companies came out and said, well, we need factory workers, right? The Fords and the Rockefellers said, come work in the factory. And they're like, no, eventually I'm not going to be able to work. I can't work for you. I got to work here at the farm so my kids can take over so I can retire. And they're, we'll give you a pension. So if you work here for 20 years, Your life expectancy is 45, we'll give you a pension. And then life expectancy went further and pensions are unaffordable. So they said, well, we'll bamboozle the entire American populace and call it a 401k and say, you've got to put it in and we'll match it. It's not a fixed pension until death because we don't know how long that's going to last. It's however much you put in, however much you contribute, how you allocate it. And then you live fairly frugally when you're really old and can't enjoy your money anyway. So you can tell what I think of retirement accounts. But that's what we were raised with. Get a job, stay there for years, climb the corporate ladder. The millennials, the Gen Y, the Gen Z, they've nailed it. You experience a much greater wage increase if you change jobs every couple of years because companies will pay money to steal you from a competitor more than a company will give you more money to keep you. So the longevity that my generation thought existed from staying at a company long time keeps your wages going up with cost of living wages versus that person that changes companies, changes fields, changes locations with remote work, takes their $80,000 barely survivable Seattle wage and moves down to Tacoma and they're the richest person on the street because of their remote work now. The goal is not your wages increase enough for you to have a more comfortable life. It's that you are in charge of your life and you make the changes that give you the life you want that don't come from COLA, cost of living raises. How do you get COLA? Annual, that would start with an A, COLA, cost of living, what's the A? Allocation. Words are hard. Hopefully that answered your question there, middle class. And the main thing to realize, and I don't know if I have this here, is the middle class is dying. And I'm going to do this because people say this all the time. The middle class is dying. That is absolutely true. And that most people think it means things are getting so expensive that if you're in the middle class, you're now poor. What it really means, the upper income grew 50%. The lower income didn't grow 50%. More people went from the middle income to the upper income since 1971 than went from the middle income to the lower income. Because of things like YouTube University, remote work, changing jobs, not staying at the same company. So when people do things like, let's track wages, the affordability index is flawed. And here's the proof. The affordability index takes the average or median income, compares it to the average or median home price, and says the average or median income can afford the average or median home price at 50%, at 30%, at 80%. The more people that can afford the average or median home, because you can use either one of those metrics and they both suck and they both don't tell you anything, doesn't account for remote work. Nobody for decades will have any idea what people in Pierce County, Washington made because they can work from Seattle, go into the office once or twice a week, make $300,000-$400,000 and live down in Pierce County where the average income is like 60 grand a year. Don't know that data. It's off the top of my head, but that's generally who I rent to is the $60,000 a year people. Tons of demand for it. So the average or median income in an area isn't counting and no one has the data or won't for years. Who's making hundreds of thousands of dollars more or double the normal for the area, but is working somewhere else, working a remote job? How many remote jobs are there that start at $22 an hour, where you can then move to a state where they use the federal minimum wage, 7 something an hour or whatever it went to, whatever it's at now. But remote work changes that. So what people need to study if you want to use that thief of joy, comparison is the thief of joy, and see how am I doing against everybody else? You need to know the mode. What is the most common income in an area? What is the most common home sold price? Because if you go to Vegas and you have a house sell for $36 million, kind of throws off what the median and the average is. Both get tweaked by that. But the mode, the most sold house is at what level? The most income is at what level? Try not to compare yourself to other people and think, what can I do to increase my situation? It is not stay at the same company. If it is stay at the same company, it's like what I did at the CDL school. I can learn to teach dump truck. I can learn to teach cement mixer. I can learn to teach passenger. I can go do presentations on base and in prisons and at WorkSource to get more students. I could figure out how to work with state agencies for funding. I could figure out how to get employers to want to hire our students, which was actually me founding a nonprofit to place jobs for HR and IT and operations and logistics and everything outside of the truck to get those companies to hire our students. You can think, what can I do at my company to get a better position in the company, not just do the same work? Because if you're doing the same work, if somebody, let's say you are, well, I'll pick on the prevailing wage people out there. You work for the county, you drive a dump truck, you drive the same amount of dirt every day, you make 3 loads from your pit to the site every day for 5 years. Why in the world should you make more money in your 5th year than you do in your first? What did you create that was more in the 5th year than the first year? First year to second year, you might have got better. You might have had less accidents. You might have not needed as much supervision. But if you drive a dump truck for the county and you're watching the Department of Transportation state jobs, and when they open up and now you change from one to the other, and that state is willing to poach you and pay a higher amount, or you find a civilian contractor job on a military installation and you take your CDL and you work there. Same industry, same job, sitting in a truck, listen to a podcast, deliver some dirt. Damn dirt haulers. Oh, drivers will only be the ones who get that. What field do you work in? What aspect of that field can increase your income? It is not your annual cost of living wage. But that was a great question. Middle class, I love it. Thank you. And I hope I didn't offend you because that wasn't the goal. The goal was to get you thinking in a new direction. My goal was to offend that guy over there. JMC, I see the reason why I mentioned the questions earlier is because the gap between income and houses prices is increasing. And now you see my answer. Yes, home prices. And so let's take remote workout. Let's say, yeah, you can't be the person who was making a couple $100,000 a year that moves to Kitsap County and buys a house and pays more than what everybody else paying here and was fine with it because rents are pushed up because remote work pushed the rents up. You're not that person. You're just going to be buying. Where are you buying? What amenities are you looking for? Right? How far is it to the store? How far is it to the movie theater? How many blinking red lights does that city have? People want to buy the expensive house with the city around it instead of buying the house where the city's going to grow. Then add the 18% interest rates in the 80s versus that what you can get 7% interest rates now. Yes, home prices are more, payments are less comparatively to wages, which is a flawed metric because remote work changed everything. Yeah, Wayne, this is the first one past 2 hours in a while because I don't have a course or a members only tonight, but that's next week. Next week, we have a members only at 6 o'clock. And Michelle has Dion at DionTalk.com if you want to go and see. No, Michelle, I love it when you guys saturate the chat. I appreciate it. If somebody ever has like a really important question, they can super chat to get it to the top because it pops up. And sometimes I miss those, but I don't think I missed any of those tonight. And I'll try to get to these really quick before we wrap up for the day. I have some of the water left that makes my eyes water. Michael Diaz just sent mine above. I don't know how to send you my contact direct. So, yeah, Dion to email me at dion@diontalk.com. If you put a URL in the chat here, it doesn't go unless you're one of the moderators for the channel. So, Michael Diaz, email me. I'll check it out. Catered 300 rum. Almost OD'd on rum at 12, so I don't drink it anymore. In the process of turning a small excavation business into rental properties. Keep the videos coming. It's a brilliant strategy. My brother did something very similar. One of them, he had a tree service, right? Residential tree service. We did some small logging too. But over the years, he would acquire rentals. He used a home equity line of credit to buy another rental. Then he would fix it up, pay off the HELOC, rinse and repeat, got 10 paid off rentals, shut down his business. And because he's a goofball, he kept all of his equipment. It's all rotting in a field. He could have sold his business, but he's like, nope, I might go back to work one day. Never know. But it doesn't matter. There were better things he could have done, but there was nothing that makes him more free. He's financially free. This is not more free than free. Thank you, Michelle, for putting that in there. I much appreciate it. Freedom Works. Dion, did you say working for Old Dominion was the easiest work you did? Care to elaborate? Yes. So I wasn't an LTL delivery driver, right? You drive a little 28-foot trailer around downtown Seattle. I think you're stupid. Stupid strong, stupid good skills, but that's a dumb job. I don't want to do it. I did line haul. I liked working at night because I was a single parent with 3 kids. I liked to be at work when they were asleep, so they didn't even know I had a job. I moved trailer from yard to yard and listened to audiobooks. Made 100, and I was at Oak Harbor, to be clear, but Old Dominion, Oak Harbor, to me, basically the same job. R&L, Peninsula, all the LTL companies. I would never work for over the road, so I saw there was an OTR driver in here. More power to you. I liked making money, and most over the road jobs back in the day would make 60 to 80,000, and local started at 190, somewhere in there. Now they're 135, depending on your job. So I did line haul, and I bumped docks, moved trailers from yard to yard, and I would pull every overtime shift that came up and work the weekends. That was why it was one of the easiest jobs I've ever done. I sat in a truck and got paid to listen to audiobooks and podcasts. Tell me the easier job. What is the hardest part of your job? Staying awake. That's the hardest part of the job. I did, bless you. I delivered for a dairy. That was still fairly easy pallet jack work, but it was still pallet jack work. So here's the hardest part of driving. Whether you're a delivery driver or anything, and why line haul was made it the easiest job that I've ever had. And I've been in the Marine Corps. It don't get much easier than that. Receiving clerks. You want to talk about the devil, like the evilest person on the planet. The back of a store has a person called a receiving clerk. And if you're here, you know I'm talking about you, just in case you're any out there. That's your world. That's your domain. And the drivers show up and it frustrates you. They're in your way. They don't do anything you like. But they're the only reason you have a freaking job. So when I delivered to places with receiving clerks, it sucked. That customers are easier to deal with than receiving clerks are. When you deliver line haul, you don't go to receiving clerks. You don't go anywhere but your own facilities where you have your dispatchers, and yeah, they can be, I don't know, they can be all right to deal with, but you see them for 5 minutes every 3 weeks. Line haul, local LTL company, bump docks, no customers, no receiving clerks, kindergarten stupid easy. Yeah. Great question. That'd be a great video title. The middle class is dying. I think we've done one of the Three Amigos on that, but yeah, I should probably do one of those. I have one coming up because somebody left the comment. I should have remembered who said it because I did a video that the one that's doing pretty good now. It's like 25,000 views, which is great. I super appreciate that. It was if you want to retire early, you need to stop lying to yourself. And somebody said, when I read the title, I thought it said you need to start lying to yourself. And I thought that's the next video. If you want to retire early, you need to start lying to yourself. I just got to figure out what those lies are before I make the video. And there we go. Wandering Doc, how do you come in here just as we're wrapping up? Sound like line haul LTL is where it's at. You just can't back up. Well, you back up half a double. So you back up shorter trailers, which react faster. You can't, you can leave a set of doubles, but you usually, in the way that I was paying, this is why they don't understand why they went on strike, because we were paid so much money. You're paid, so line haul's paid by the mile, but you're paid per trailer and dolly and dock you touch. So if you clink into a set of doubles, that's 2 trailers and a dolly. We get to the new place and you park it, you put a dolly at the dock, or you put a trailer, 2 trailers at the docks, 2 trailers, and you put the dolly where it goes. You were paid for the miles, you were paid for that. It just, the money racks up so fast. Sounds like a lot of work. 14-hour shift, you do like 3 things. That's enough truck talk. I am going to wrap up there. I will see you guys in my next videos. I appreciate you hanging out with me. I am doing more short form videos, live streams throughout the week. I hope you're enjoying those. Let me know if you have any questions you want answered in one of those videos. I will be doing that. Next Tuesday, members only. So if you have a deal you want us to look at as a member, Tuesday, 6 p.m. Pacific, we'll be here. We'll all be on Zoom together. You don't have to be. You can be on YouTube watching Zoom. for those people that weren't sure. And then all through July, for people who just joined the course, we will do members, and we will do course videos every Tuesday. Members only is 2 times a month. Course video is going to be every Tuesday for the whole month of July. We will do portfolio deep dives. We will learn things about management, how management relates to real estate, what NLP relates to real estate, how mirroring relates to real estate, all of these things that we cover in the course that go over how to do this and have the least likelihood of having to do the worst thing that can happen to a person who reaches financial freedom, which is the best thing that happens to everyone else every day of their life. We could have to go back to work. Dennis, I asked one of those litmus test questions of my agent friend regarding disrespectful offers. They were all about it. No issues for them. So that was a good call. Nice. So yeah, I don't care what their skill level is, as long as they're willing to take input from me, right? And don't tell me, oh, I've been in this for 20 years and we just don't do it that way. If I have a justifiable reason and they're flexible, I worked with a guy that was brand new and I've done 5 deals with him so far. And now he's amazing. He's in several years into it. And he's helped several people here that are in the chat buy properties. Until my next video, thanks for coming to my Dion Talk.